Hey everyone, welcome back to Dark Harry. Today we're diving into an amazing story called What If Wednesday Entered Hogwarts Just to Protect Harry. Every bully regretted everything. If you love these stories, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us bring more content to you. Without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 1, The darkness arrives. The gargoyles flanking Hogwarts entrance hall shifted uncomfortably as Wednesday Addams glided through the massive oak doors. Thunder cracked outside despite the previously clear September sky, and several students would later swear the torches dimmed as she passed. "Miss Addams, I presume?" Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the whispers that followed the pale girl in black. "Welcome to Hogwarts. I trust your journey was satisfactory." Wednesday fixed her with an unblinking stare. "The cemetery shortcut was adequate, though your groundskeeper seemed disturbed by my arrival method." She tucked a small leather-bound book into her pocket. "Thing enjoyed the trip." McGonagall's eyes narrowed at the disembodied hand that poked out from Wednesday's sleeve to give a little wave before disappearing again. "Yes, well, we'll discuss your particular accommodations after the sorting. The other students are already gathered." I hung back as McGonagall led Wednesday toward the Great Hall. The first years had already been sorted, but Dumbledore stood to make an announcement before the feast began. "Before we indulge in our magnificent feast, I have one final introduction. This year, Hogwarts is hosting its first exchange student from the Salem Witches Institute in America. Please welcome Miss Wednesday Addams, who will be joining the 5th year." Every head in the hall turned as Wednesday stepped forward, her perfectly braided pigtails and pristine white collar contrasting sharply with her otherwise all-black attire. Her expression remained perfectly neutral as she scanned the room, her dark eyes lingering momentarily on the Gryffindor table. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered beside me. "She looks like she's attending our funerals." "Shoo!" Hermione hissed, though she too was staring. McGonagall placed the sorting hat on Wednesday's head. For nearly a full minute, nothing happened, no movement, no announcement. Then the hat began to twitch violently. Most unusual indeed," the hat muttered audibly. "Such darkness, yet not the corrupted kind. Where to put one who would be equally at home in all houses, yet belong in none?" Wednesday's expression hadn't changed, but I could swear the temperature in the hall dropped several degrees. "Ravenclaw," the hat finally declared, sounding almost relieved to be removed from her head. A smattering of uncertain applause came from the Ravenclaw table as Wednesday made her way over. Luna Lovegood slid aside, patting the bench beside her with a dreamy smile. "Your aura has the most fascinating death moth circling it," Luna said by way of greeting. For the first time, Wednesday's expression shifted, the faintest hint of a smile. "You can see them? Interesting." "Mental, both of them," Ron mumbled through a mouthful of chicken that had appeared once Wednesday sat down. I couldn't explain why, but I kept glancing at the Ravenclaw table throughout dinner. Something about the new girl seemed off. Not in the usual way new students were nervous or excited, but like she was cataloging everything and everyone for some specific purpose. At one point, her eyes met mine directly across the hall. She didn't look away or seem embarrassed to be caught staring. Instead, she gave me the slightest nod, as if confirming something to herself. "She's looking at you again, Harry," Hermione noted quietly. "Maybe she's just curious about the boy who lived," I said, though it didn't feel like the typical staring I was used to. "No, it's different," Hermione insisted. "More analytical." I shrugged, trying to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Professor Umbridge's first offense against the dark arts class was exactly the mind-numbing experience I'd expected after her speech at the welcome feast. Reading theory without practical application seemed designed specifically to leave us vulnerable. "There is no reason to use defensive spells," Umbridge simpered when I challenged her. "Who would want to attack children like yourselves?" "Oh, I don't know," I shot back, anger rising. "Maybe Lord Voldemort?" The classroom went silent. Umbridge's face tightened into a horrible smile. 10 points from Gryffindor, Mr. Potter. Now, let me make something quite plain. You have been told that a certain dark wizard has returned. This is a lie. It's not a lie. I saw him, I fought him. Detention, Mr. Potter. Tomorrow evening, 5 o'clock, my office. I was fuming, barely noticing the movement at the back of the class until a calm, monotone voice cut through the tension. Fascinating, said Wednesday, who had somehow materialized at my side. In Salem, we're taught that denying death only strengthens its hold. The same principle applies to dark wizards. Umbridge's gaze snapped to Wednesday. This is not how we conduct ourselves at Hogwarts, Miss Adams. Clearly, Wednesday replied, casually examining a small bone she'd pulled from her pocket. My mistake. Umbridge's nostrils flared. Return to your seat immediately. As Wednesday passed my desk, she dropped something into my bag with subtle precision. I didn't dare check what it was until class ended. It was a small vial of clear liquid with a note, for the blood quill. 3 drops on your hand before detention. The pain remains, the scarring won't. I stared at the vial, questions swirling. How did she know about the blood quill? Umbridge hadn't even used it on anyone yet this term. The Gryffindor common room buzzed with the day's events that evening. That new girl is seriously weird, Seamus said. Flitwick asked her to demonstrate a simple levitation charm, and instead of using her wand, she started chanting something in Latin. Made the feather burst into flames that spelled out the answer to his next question. She's in my arithmancy class, Hermione added. Professor Vector gave her a complex equation, and she solved it by creating some sort of divination chart using small animal bones. Sounds like she's just showing off, Ron grumbled. I hadn't told them about the vial yet, still trying to figure out why Wednesday would help me. She's different, I admitted. But she stood up to Umbridge in her own way. Later that night, I pulled out the Marauder's map out of habit, scanning the castle. Most students were in their dormitories, professors in their quarters. Filch was patrolling the 3rd floor with Mrs. Norris. But there was one dot moving purposefully through the dungeons that caught my eye, Wednesday Addams. As I watched, her dot moved into what appeared to be a solid wall, a secret passage not even the Marauders had discovered. She emerged minutes later and headed directly toward Umbridge's office. My heart raced. Was she going to get herself expelled on her first day? But Wednesday's dot stopped just outside the office door. It remained stationary for nearly 10 minutes before moving away, heading back toward Ravenclaw Tower through another unusual route. The next evening, just before my detention, I hesitated outside Umbridge's door, the small vial cold in my palm. Trusting the strange new girl seemed risky, but something told me her intentions weren't malicious, at least not toward me. I quickly applied 3 drops to the back of my hand and entered. Good evening, Mr. Potter, Umbridge said sweetly. You're going to be doing some lines for me tonight. The detention proceeded exactly as expected. The quill sliced into my skin with each line of, I must not tell lies, but true to Wednesday's promise, while I felt the pain, the cuts healed completely between lines, leaving no trace. Umbridge's face grew increasingly confused as she checked my hand throughout the session. Is something wrong, Professor? I asked innocently. She forced a smile. Continue your lines, Mr. Potter. When I finally left her office, I found Wednesday leaning against the wall in the shadowy corridor. Worked, didn't it? She said, not really a question. How did you know about the blood quill? And what was in that vial? Essence of mending. Family recipe. She fell into step beside me. As for the quill, let's just say Professor Umbridge isn't as original as she thinks. My cousin Ophelia had a similar experience at Salem with a visiting British ministry official. I studied her face, trying to read her expression in the dim corridor. Why help me? Wednesday considered this for a moment. Let's call it family business. That's not really an answer. No, it isn't. She stopped walking, turning to face me directly. Harry Potter, do you believe in fate? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. Divination's never been my strong subject. It's not about predicting the future. It's about honoring old promises. She pulled out a worn envelope from her pocket. My family sent me here for a specific purpose. You're part of that purpose. Before I could ask anything more, Peeves swooped down the corridor, cackling madly. By the time he'd passed, Wednesday had vanished, leaving me with more questions than answers. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing Wednesday's presence at oddly convenient moments. When Crabbe and Goyle cornered a second-year Hufflepuff, Wednesday appeared with what she claimed was a cursed Aztec friendship bracelet that would bind their souls for eternity if they continued bullying. They fled without looking back. When Pansy Parkinson mocked Hermione in potions, she discovered her prized hairbrush had been replaced with one that spelled out, "bully," across her forehead in invisible ink, visible only to those who'd been bullied themselves. Half the school could suddenly see the word blazing on her face. It wasn't me, Hermione insisted when we discussed it in the library. Though I can't say I'm sorry it happened. It's her, isn't it? Ron whispered, glancing nervously at Wednesday, who sat alone at a distant table, surrounded by ancient-looking books. She's like some kind of vengeful ghost, appearing whenever someone's being a git. She's not a ghost, Ronald, Hermione said, but she too was watching Wednesday with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant admiration. I was about to respond when Draco Malfoy strutted into the library with Crabbe and Goyle flanking him. He made a beeline for Wednesday's table. "So, Adams," he drawled loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I heard your family lives in a house that's practically falling apart. Is that why they sent you here? Couldn't afford to feed you anymore?" Wednesday slowly closed her book and looked up. Her face remained perfectly expressionless, but something in her eyes made Malfoy take an involuntary step back. "Draco Malfoy," she said, her voice soft but carrying across the silent library. "Your family has quite the history. Did you know the Malfoys and the Adamses crossed paths in 1705? Your ancestor Brutus Malfoy made the mistake of threatening my great-great-grandmother Eliza Adams." Malfoy's smirk faltered. "So what? So what happened to him is family legend." Wednesday stood up, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Would you like to know how many pieces they found him in? Or perhaps you prefer to know which pieces they never found?" The color drained from Malfoy's face. "You're making that up," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Wednesday stepped closer, and though she was shorter than Malfoy, he retreated another step. "Care to test the family history?" For a moment, nobody moved. Then Malfoy muttered something about having better things to do and hurried out, Crabbe and Goyle lumbering after him. Wednesday calmly returned to her seat as whispers erupted throughout the library. Her eyes briefly met mine, and I could have sworn I saw the ghost of a smile. That night, Hermione cornered me in the common room while Ron was busy with a particularly difficult potions essay. "Harry, don't you think it's odd how that Wednesday girl always seems to be wherever you are?" I shrugged, trying to seem unconcerned. "Maybe we just have similar schedules." "No, it's more than that." Hermione lowered her voice. "Yesterday, I saw her outside the Quidditch pitch during your practice. She wasn't watching the team, she was watching the stands, like she was looking for threats." "You think she's working for Umbridge?" I asked, though somehow that didn't fit what I'd seen of Wednesday. "No. I think she's protecting you." Hermione chewed her lip thoughtfully. "But why? What's her connection to you?" I hesitated, then told Hermione about the vial Wednesday had given me for detention and our strange conversation afterward. "Family business? Old promises?" Hermione repeated, frowning. "I need to check something in the library." Over breakfast the next morning, dozens of owls swooped into the great hall delivering the Daily Mail. I wasn't expecting anything, so I was surprised when a raven, not an owl, dropped a small package in front of me before flying to the Ravenclaw table where it perched on Wednesday's shoulder. The package contained a small leather-bound book and a note in elegant, spidery handwriting. "Harry, some dreams are more than dreams." This journal belonged to an ancestor who learned to control unwanted mental intrusions. It might prove useful given your current nightmares. I nearly dropped the book. How did she know about my nightmares? I hadn't told anyone except Ron and Hermione about the recurring dream of the long corridor. Across the hall, Wednesday fed the raven bits of what looked suspiciously like raw meat from her plate. When she caught me watching, she simply nodded toward the book, her expression clearly saying, "Use it." Later that day, I flipped through the journal, finding it filled with exercises for clearing the mind, focusing thoughts, and building mental barriers, similar to what I imagined occlumency might be, though I wouldn't learn that term until later. "She's not in any of the books about American wizarding schools," Hermione announced, dropping into the chair beside me in the common room that evening. "In fact, there's barely any mention of the Addams family in any wizarding genealogy, despite her clearly being a witch." "Maybe they're just private," Ron suggested. "Too private. It's like someone deliberately removed information about them." Hermione looked frustrated. "But I did find one reference in Obscure Magical Bloodlines of the 18th century. It mentioned an Addams who specialized in death magic, and was rumored to have made a pact with several prominent wizarding families." "Death magic?" Ron squeaked. "Like necromancy?" "Not exactly. More like magic that exists in the boundary between life and death." Hermione frowned. The book was vague, but it suggested the Addamses weren't quite like other witches and wizards. "They practice a different kind of magic altogether." "That fits with what I've seen," I admitted. "She doesn't use her wand much, and when she does, it's for show. Most of her magic seems to be, I don't know, instinctive." Hermione nodded slowly. "The question remains, why is she so focused on you, Harry?" Before I could answer, the common room portrait swung open, and Neville stumbled in, looking pale. "You'll never believe what just happened in the greenhouse," he gasped. "Umbridge was inspecting Professor Sprout's class, and she started saying horrible things about Dumbledore. Then suddenly, all the venomous tentacula started reaching for her, just her, no one else. Professor Sprout couldn't explain it." "Was Wednesday in that class?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Neville nodded. "She was working at the station next to mine. Right before it happened, I saw her feeding something to her plant and whispering to it." Ron, Hermione and I exchanged glances. "I think it's time we had a proper conversation with Wednesday Addams," Hermione said firmly. Finding a moment to speak privately with Wednesday proved challenging. She had a knack for disappearing between classes, and the Ravenclaw Tower was inaccessible to us. Finally, I spotted her heading toward the Black Lake alone after dinner. "Wednesday," I called, jogging to catch up with Ron and Hermione following. She turned, unsurprised. "Harry Potter. And friends. We need to talk," I said, trying to sound authoritative. "Yes, we do." She glanced at the darkening sky. "Follow me. There's somewhere more private." She led us to a secluded clearing near the edge of the forbidden forest. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds, and a chill wind rustled the leaves. "Ask your questions," Wednesday said once we stopped. "Why are you really here?" I demanded. "And why are you following me around?" "I told you. Family business." "That's not good enough," Hermione interjected. "You've been watching Harry, intervening when he's in trouble, and somehow you know things you shouldn't, like his nightmares." Wednesday studied each of us carefully before reaching into her pocket and pulling out an old photograph. She handed it to me. The magical photo showed two families standing together outside what must have been the Addams mansion, a Victorian Gothic structure that looked deliberately dilapidated. In the center stood a tall, pale man with a pencil mustache beside a woman who could only be Wednesday's mother, the same pale skin and intense eyes. A round, bald uncle and a young boy who resembled Wednesday were also present. But what made my breath catch was the other family in the photo, a man with messy black hair and glasses, and a woman with long red hair, holding a baby. "My parents," I whispered. "James and Lily Potter visited the Addams family manor 3 months before their deaths," Wednesday explained. "They came seeking protection, not for themselves, but for you." "Protection? What kind of protection?" Hermione asked, peering at the photo. "The Addams family has practiced protective magic for generations. Not the kind taught at Hogwarts or regulated by ministries." Wednesday took back the photo, handling it carefully. "My family made a blood pact with yours, Harry. In exchange for certain magical knowledge James Potter provided, the Addamses vowed to protect their lineage if ever needed." "But I've never heard of this," I said. "And why now, after all these years?" "The pact activates only when the threat reaches a certain threshold." Wednesday's eyes were intense in the fading light. "My parents felt it awaken last June. They've been planning my transfer ever since." "When Voldemort returned," I said slowly. Wednesday nodded. "The protective magic your mother used to save you has connections to our family traditions. That's why I can sense when you're in danger, why I know about your nightmares." "This is mental," Ron muttered. "Your family practices some weird dark magic and now you're what, Harry's bodyguard?" "The magic isn't dark, it's different," Wednesday corrected. "And I'm not just here to protect Harry physically. There's more at stake." "What do you mean?" I pressed. "The connection between you and Voldemort. It's growing stronger, isn't it? The dreams, the emotions that aren't yours." When I nodded, she continued, "That's a magical vulnerability my family specializes in addressing. Death magic exists in the boundaries between souls." Hermione's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "That journal you gave Harry, it's for a clemency, isn't it?" "A version of it, yes. Though we call it soul shielding." Wednesday pulled out a small pouch. "I need to be honest with you, Harry. I'm not just here to protect you from bullies and Umbridge. Something bigger is coming, and you're not prepared." "I've faced Voldemort before," I said defensively. "Not like this." She opened the pouch, revealing what looked like small finger bones. "My family believes Voldemort has violated the most sacred boundaries of death magic. That makes him our concern too." She tossed the bones onto the ground, where they arranged themselves in a pattern that made my scar prickle uncomfortably. "You have a piece of him inside you, Harry Potter. And I'm here to help you control it before it controls you." The next morning, Educational Decree No. 24 appeared on the common room notice board, banning all student organizations without Umbridge's approval. "She knows," Hermione whispered. "About Dumbledore's army." "How could she?" Ron asked. I frowned, remembering something. "Wednesday warned me last night that Umbridge was planning a new decree. She said we should be careful about where we meet." "You trust her now?" Hermione asked cautiously. I thought about the photograph, about the bones that had spelled out a warning in the dirt. "I don't know if I trust her methods, but I believe she's trying to help." During breakfast, I noticed Wednesday wasn't at the Ravenclaw table. She didn't appear in any classes that day, and a knot of worry formed in my stomach. Had Umbridge done something to her? My answer came during History of Magic, when a paper crane flew onto my desk while Professor Binns droned on about giant wars. The note inside read, "Umbridge's office. Midnight. Bring your invisibility cloak. There's something you need to see." You can't go," Hermione insisted when I showed her the note. "It could be a trap. Or Wednesday might have found something important," I countered. "She's taken risks to help me already." "Which is exactly why it's suspicious," Hermione argued. "No one does that without wanting something in return." But my mind was made up. At 1:15 midnight, I slipped out of Gryffindor Tower under my invisibility cloak. The corridors were silent and dark, with only the occasional ghost drifting past. I moved carefully toward Umbridge's office, watching the Marauders map for any sign of Filch or Mrs. Norris. Wednesday was already waiting outside the office, standing perfectly still in the shadows. She didn't seem surprised when I appeared from beneath the cloak. "Good. You came." She gestured to the door. "I've temporarily neutralized her security spells. We need to be quick." "How did you?" "Never mind. What are we looking for?" "Evidence." Wednesday pulled a thin silver tool from her sleeve and touched it to the lock, which clicked open immediately. "Umbridge has been communicating with someone outside Hogwarts, someone connected to Voldemort." Inside the office, the walls were covered with ornamental plates featuring mewing kittens that watched us with suspicious eyes. Wednesday moved directly to Umbridge's desk and began opening drawers while I kept watch. "Here," she murmured after a moment. "Look at these letters." She handed me several pieces of parchment. Most were correspondence with the ministry, but one caught my eye, a letter signed with only an elegant L that mentioned keeping Potter under control and ensuring the corridor remained secure. "Lucius Malfoy," I breathed. "He's telling her to watch me, but what corridor?" "The one in your dreams." Wednesday carefully replaced the letters exactly as she'd found them. "The Department of Mysteries. There's something there Voldemort wants." A noise in the hallway made us freeze. Wednesday quickly closed the drawer and pulled me under the invisibility cloak just as the door creaked open. Umbridge stood in the doorway, her toad-like face suspicious as she peered into the darkened office. For a tense minute, she surveyed the room, her eyes passing right over us. Finally, apparently satisfied, she closed the door and locked it. Once her footsteps faded, Wednesday slipped out from under the cloak. "We should go separately. She might come back." "Wait," I grabbed her arm. "How do you know about my dreams?" "About the corridor?" Wednesday's dark eyes studied mine. "Because the Addams family has its own connections to the Department of Mysteries. Something's been disturbed there, something that should have remained buried." Before I could ask anything more, she was gone, slipping out the door with uncanny silence. I waited a few minutes before following, mind racing with new questions. The next morning at breakfast, Hermione was reading the Daily Prophet with a frown while Ron and I discussed Quidditch strategies. "There's been another break-in attempt at the ministry," she announced, lowering the paper. "They're not saying which department, but it must be serious if they're reporting it at all." "The Department of Mysteries," I said without thinking. Hermione's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" I quickly told them about what Wednesday and I had discovered in Umbridge's office. "So Malfoy's father is giving Umbridge orders about watching you?" Ron looked outraged. "We've got to tell Dumbledore." "Dumbledore's barely at Hogwarts these days," I reminded him. "And when he is, he's avoiding me completely." "Then what do we do?" Hermione asked. I glanced across the hall to where Wednesday had finally reappeared at the Ravenclaw table. She was calmly buttering toast while the students around her maintained a respectful distance. "I think we need to learn more about what's in the Department of Mysteries," I decided. "And why Voldemort wants it so badly. And you think she can help with that?" Ron nodded toward Wednesday. "I think she knows more than she's telling us," I admitted. "But I also think she genuinely wants to help." After classes that day, I approached Wednesday in the library where she sat alone, reading what appeared to be a book written entirely in runes. "We need to talk about the Department of Mysteries," I said without preamble. She closed her book. "Not here." We walked in silence to the Room of Requirement, which had become our meeting place for Dumbledore's army, though we hadn't yet held the first official meeting. Wednesday paced 3 times in front of the wall, and a door appeared that led to a small, dimly lit room with 2 chairs facing a fireplace. "The Department of Mysteries houses many things," she began once we were seated. "Prophecies, time, death, love, thought, each studied in its own chamber. The room of death contains an archway with a veil between worlds. And that's what Voldemort wants. This veil? Wednesday shook her head. No. He wants a prophecy, specifically, the one made about you and him. But my family is concerned about the veil. The barriers between life and death have been unstable since Voldemort's return. Because he cheated death. I guessed. Precisely. Wednesday pulled out a small, ancient-looking book from her pocket. This contains information about what Voldemort might have done to survive that night in Godric's Hollow. My parents think he created Horcruxes, objects containing pieces of his soul. Is that what's in me? A Horcrux? The idea made me feel ill. Not exactly. Wednesday's expression softened slightly, the closest to sympathy I'd seen from her. You're something unexpected. An accident. That's why the connection works both ways. So how do I get rid of it? That's what I'm here to help figure out. She opened the book, revealing pages of spidery writing. Traditional methods would require, well, your death. But my family believes there might be another way. That's comforting, I muttered sarcastically. A ghost of a smile flickered across Wednesday's face. The Addams family specializes in finding loopholes in death magic. We've been doing it for generations. Is that why you're dealing with all the bullies? Practice for dealing with Voldemort? No. Wednesday's eyes met mine directly. That's simply because I despise bullies. My brother Pugsley and I have extensive experience handling them. For the first time, I laughed genuinely in her presence. Well, you're certainly effective. Malfoy practically runs the other way when he sees you coming now. Fear is useful, Wednesday agreed. But in your case, what you need isn't more fear. It's control. She stood and moved to a cabinet that had appeared along the wall, removing what looked like a pensieve. Tonight, we begin your real training. Not the defensive spells you're teaching your friends, those are useful, but limited. She placed the pensieve on a table between us. We're going to work on your mind, on strengthening the barriers Voldemort is breaking down. You sound like Hermione, I said, earning another almost smile. Your friend is intelligent. You should listen to her more often. Wednesday pulled out her wand, a dark, twisted piece of wood unlike any I'd seen before. Now, let me show you how the Addams family deals with unwanted mental intrusions. That night marked the beginning of our real work together, and the true start of Wednesday Addams' mission to protect me, whether I wanted protection or not. As October progressed, two parallel storylines developed at Hogwarts. The first was the increasingly oppressive regime of Dolores Umbridge, with new educational decrees appearing weekly and the inquisitorial squad gaining power. The second, known only to a few, was Wednesday Addams' systematic disruption of that regime. When Umbridge banned the Quibbler after Luna's father published an interview with me about Voldemort's return, copies began appearing throughout the castle in the most unlikely places, inside sealed textbooks, behind portraits, even within the frames of Umbridge's own kitten plates, where the text would appear only when she wasn't looking. When the inquisitorial squad caught a third-year Hufflepuff with Weasley's Wizard Wheezes products and threatened to string him up by his thumbs, with Umbridge's approval, they woke the next morning to find themselves speaking in childish rhymes that grew more embarrassing the more they tried to threaten anyone. And when Umbridge fired Professor Trelawney, planning to have her removed from the castle entirely, a series of increasingly disturbing portents appeared in Umbridge's morning tea, personal correspondence, and even her dreams, culminating in her reluctant decision to allow Trelawney to remain at Hogwarts. Through it all, Wednesday maintained her perfect composure, never directly confronting Umbridge but always seeming to be 3 steps ahead. Our private lessons continued as well, with my mental defenses growing stronger despite the increasingly vivid dreams about the Department of Mysteries corridor. The first official meeting of Dumbledore's army took place in late October. Wednesday attended but remained on the periphery, observing as I taught basic defensive spells. "You're a good teacher," she noted afterward as we walked back to the castle under the invisibility cloak. "Your friends trust you." I'm just teaching them what I already know, I said, uncomfortable with the praise. Which is more than most adult wizards. She glanced sideways at me. You underestimate yourself, Harry Potter. And you're still not telling me everything, I countered. Like what exactly your family wants in return for this protection. Wednesday was silent for a moment. The arrangement between our families isn't transactional in the way you're thinking. The Adamses and the Potters have been connected for centuries, though few know it. Your father sought us out because of that history. But what? I broke off as Mrs. Norris appeared around the corner, her lamp-like eyes staring directly at us despite the invisibility cloak. Wednesday pulled something from her pocket, it looked like a small mouse bone, and flicked it down the opposite corridor. A faint scrabbling sound drew Mrs. Norris away. Your father gave my family something invaluable, Wednesday continued once the cat had gone. Knowledge about the connections between different types of magic. In return, we promised protection for his lineage. That's it? Just protection. For an Adams, a blood oath of protection is never just anything. Her voice took on a rare intensity. It binds our family magic to yours. If you die while under our protection, there are consequences for us as well. That revelation lingered in my mind as October gave way to November. The weather turned colder, and tensions in the castle continued to rise. Umbridge's frustration grew visible as her attempts to control Hogwarts were continually undermined by mysterious incidents she could never quite trace back to their source. Meanwhile, my nightmares about the corridor intensified, despite Wednesday's tutelage in what she called soul shielding. I began to feel Voldemort's emotions more strongly, his impatience, his hunger for something just beyond his reach. The first Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin, brought matters to a head. The Slytherins had created badges that read, "Weasley is our king," mocking Ron's nervousness as the new Gryffindor keeper. Their taunting song echoed across the pitch during the match, growing louder with each goal Ron missed. I spotted Wednesday in the stands, not cheering for either side but watching the crowd with her usual intense focus. When Malfoy began directing particularly vicious insults at Ron's family after Gryffindor's narrow victory, I saw her lean forward slightly, her attention sharpening. At least no one had to buy their way onto the Gryffindor team, I shot back at Malfoy, holding George back as he lunged forward. They got in on pure talent. Malfoy's pale face flushed. The Weasleys' house could fit in our servants' quarters. How can you stand the smell, Potter? Before I could respond, Fred broke free from Angelina's restraining grip and lunged at Malfoy. I joined him without thinking, rage blinding me to everything except the desire to wipe the smirk off Malfoy's face. It took multiple people to pull us apart. Madame Hooch ordered us to McGonagall's office immediately, where a far worse punishment awaited. Umbridge had just issued Educational Decree No. 25, giving her authority over all punishments and sanctions. Banned, Fred said hollowly later in the common room. Banned for life. She can't do this, Angelina said, though we all knew Umbridge absolutely could and had. Fred, George, and I were permanently banned from playing Quidditch, our brooms confiscated. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the day's events and seething with helpless anger. Around midnight, I gave up and headed to the common room, surprised to find it not empty. Wednesday Addams sat in an armchair by the dying fire. How did you get in here? I demanded, too upset to be polite. This is Gryffindor Tower. The fat lady and I came to an arrangement, Wednesday said calmly. She has quite the interest in macabre poetry. Great. Is there anyone in this castle you haven't manipulated? Wednesday raised an eyebrow. You're angry. Brilliant observation. I dropped into the chair opposite her. Umbridge has banned me from Quidditch for life and took my firebolt, Sirius's gift. So yes, I'm angry. Understandable. Wednesday leaned forward. What are you going to do about it? What can I do? She has the ministry's backing. The old Wednesday would have dealt with her directly, Wednesday mused. Hemlock in her tea, perhaps, or a particularly vindictive curse on those awful kitten plates. But that would be counterproductive in the long term. I don't want to poison her, I said quickly. I just want justice? Wednesday suggested. Or revenge? Both, I guess. There's a difference. She pulled out a small object from her pocket, the disembodied hand I'd glimpsed on her first day. This is Thing. A family friend. He has a gift for acquiring information. The hand gave a little wave. Thing has been exploring Umbridge's quarters while she sleeps. He's discovered some interesting correspondences with Cornelius Fudge. Wednesday's lips curved in a rare smile. Information that could prove very useful at the right moment. You're blackmailing her. I prefer to think of it as establishing leverage. She gestured to Thing, who skittered across the table to hand me a small roll of parchment. These are copies of Umbridge's orders from the ministry. Note the part about controlling the Potter situation by any means necessary. I scanned the document, blood boiling at Umbridge's detailed plans to discredit me and anyone who supported my claims about Voldemort's return. This won't get my broom back, I said finally. No, Wednesday agreed. But it gives us options. Umbridge isn't the real enemy, Harry. She's a symptom of a larger disease, fear. Voldemort's greatest weapon. She stood, Thing climbing up her arm to perch on her shoulder. Keep those documents safe. When the time comes, they'll be useful. Wednesday, I called as she headed toward the portrait hole. Thanks. For trying to help. She paused, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite read. I made a promise, Harry Potter. Adamses always keep their promises, especially the dark ones. With that cryptic statement, she slipped out into the corridor, leaving me alone with the damning evidence against Umbridge and the first glimmer of hope I'd felt all day. The following week brought the first snowfall of the season and the final DA meeting before the Christmas holiday. We were practicing the Patronus charm, difficult magic that few had mastered, though many were making good progress. Think of something happy, I reminded everyone, walking around to observe their efforts. The happiest memory you can. Silver vapor of varying intensities emanated from several wands. Hermione had produced an indistinct silvery shape that might have been an otter, while Ron's looked more like a cloud with legs. Wednesday, surprisingly, wasn't attempting the charm at all. She sat cross-legged in a corner, eyes closed, palms flat on the floor. Aren't you going to try? I asked, approaching her. The Patronus charm requires joy, she said without opening her eyes. I find other emotions more useful. Like what? Purpose. Determination. The satisfaction of perfectly executed vengeance. Her eyes opened, focusing on me. Did you know there are other ways to repel Dementors? Older ways. Before I could respond, a cry of delight came from Luna Lovegood as a silver hair burst from her wand, bounding around the room. I did it, she exclaimed. I was thinking about the day I found a crumplehorn snorkack footprint in our garden. Praise and encouragement filled the room as others redoubled their efforts. Neville, particularly, seemed frustrated by his lack of progress. I can't think of anything happy enough, he admitted when I stopped by. It doesn't have to be a specific memory, I suggested. It could be something you imagine, something that brings you joy when you think about it. Wednesday had risen and moved to stand beside Neville. Try rage, she said quietly. What? Neville looked startled. Righteous anger. Channel it into protection. Wednesday's dark eyes held Neville's. Think of what was taken from you. Transform that loss into a shield. I started to object, that wasn't how the Patronus charm worked, but stopped as Neville's expression shifted from confusion to fierce concentration. He raised his wand with new determination. Expecto Patronum. A silver shape burst forth, not fully corporeal, but distinctly more substantial than anything he'd produced before. It worked. Neville gasped, watching the silvery shield hover before him. Wednesday nodded once. Rage can be protective when properly directed. The lesson continued until Dobby appeared with a warning. Umbridge had discovered our location and was on her way with the inquisitorial squad. Panic erupted as everyone scrambled to escape. Go, I urged the others. Different directions, back to your dormitories. In the chaos, I lost track of Wednesday. It wasn't until I was running down a 7th-floor corridor that I spotted her again, not fleeing but walking calmly toward the approaching footsteps. What are you doing? I hissed, grabbing her arm. They'll catch you. Sometimes, Wednesday said, gently removing my hand, the best defense is a strategic surrender. Before I could argue further, she gave me a firm push toward a concealed passageway. Go. Now. I'll create a diversion. Reluctantly, I slipped into the passage, but remained close enough to hear what happened next. Miss Adams. Umbridge's sickly sweet voice rang out. Out after curfew. And what is that you're carrying? A book, Professor, Wednesday's monotone reply came. On advanced defensive magic. I was returning to my dormitory after some independent study. Independent study? I think not. You were part of Potter's illegal group, weren't you? I don't know what you mean, Professor, Wednesday said evenly. I prefer to study alone. Groups are inefficient. We shall see about that. My inquisitorial squad is rounding up Potter's little friends as we speak. Your punishment will be severe, I promise you. Punishment? Wednesday's voice took on a quality I'd never heard before, a cold amusement that made even me shiver. How fascinating. My family has quite the historical collection of punishment devices. Perhaps you'd like to compare notes sometime. A silence followed, broken only by Umbridge's nervous throat clearing. Come with me to my office immediately, Miss Adams. Their footsteps receded, leaving me hidden in the passage, torn between concern for Wednesday and admiration for her self-sacrifice. She had deliberately allowed herself to be caught to give the rest of us time to escape. I made my way back to Gryffindor Tower, where I found Ron and Hermione anxiously waiting. They got Marietta Edgecombe, Hermione reported. And apparently that new Ravenclaw girl, Wednesday. She let herself be caught, I explained. To distract Umbridge. Mental, Ron muttered. Completely mental. What will Umbridge do to her? Hermione asked worriedly. I thought about the documents Wednesday had shown me, about her uncanny ability to turn situations to her advantage. I think the real question is, what will Wednesday do to Umbridge? We found out the next morning. Breakfast was interrupted by screams coming from the entrance hall, where Umbridge stood frozen in apparent terror, staring at something only she could see. Professor McGonagall hurried over. Dolores. What on earth is the matter? Umbridge's face was chalk white, her eyes wide with horror. She pointed a trembling finger at empty air. There. Don't you see it? The hand, the crawling hand. McGonagall looked bewildered. There's nothing there, Dolores. It's coming for me. Umbridge shrieked, backing away from nothing. It's been following me all night. Appearing in my mirror, under my bed, in my teacup. Students gathered to watch as Umbridge continued to cower from invisible threats. At the edge of the crowd, Wednesday stood calmly observing, her expression as neutral as ever. Only I noticed the small, satisfied gleam in her eyes, or the way Thing gave me a tiny thumbs up from her pocket. By lunchtime, rumors were flying. Umbridge had barricaded herself in her office, refusing to come out or teach classes. The inquisitorial squad suddenly seemed less enthusiastic about enforcing her rules. What did you do to her? I asked Wednesday when I caught up with her between classes. Nothing permanent, she replied. Just a simple fear projection spell. It reveals what someone already fears most. And Umbridge is terrified of hands. Among other things. Wednesday's expression remained impassive, but her eyes glinted. She'll recover in a day or two, physically, at least. Her reputation may take longer to mend. You didn't have to do that, get caught to help us escape. Wednesday studied me for a moment. There are many things I don't have to do, Harry Potter. I choose to do them anyway. That's what protection means. For the first time, I felt I was seeing beyond Wednesday's carefully maintained facade, to something fiercely loyal and utterly determined. It was both comforting and slightly terrifying to know such a force had aligned itself with me. Thank you, I said simply. She nodded once, then glided away to her next class, the corridor seeming to darken slightly in her wake. As the Christmas holidays approached, Umbridge gradually emerged from her self-imposed isolation, though something had clearly changed. She jumped at shadows, avoided walking the corridors alone, and seemed particularly terrified of anything that moved independently, from enchanted suits of armor to the animated figures in paintings. The DA meetings continued with greater caution, and Wednesday began attending more regularly, though she still practiced different magic than the rest of us. Her presence had an unexpected effect on the group dynamics. Students who had been hesitant or fearful became more determined, as if her unwavering confidence was contagious. She's scary, Neville admitted one evening after a particularly successful DA session, but in a good way, you know. Like she makes you believe you can be scary too, if you need to be. That's actually pretty insightful, Hermione said, looking thoughtful. My private sessions with Wednesday continued as well, focused on strengthening my mental defenses against Voldemort's intrusions. The nightmares about the Department of Mysteries corridor had become more vivid, often ending with me standing before a door I desperately wanted to open. Your connection is growing stronger, Wednesday observed during our last session before the holidays. That's concerning. I'm trying the techniques you taught me, I said defensively. They're not working as well anymore. Because he's actively pushing now, not just passively connected. She frowned slightly. I need to consult with my family over the break. There might be stronger methods we can try. You're going home for Christmas? Briefly. My mother wants a full report, and there are family grimoires I need to access. She handed me a small black box. Take this with you to your godfather's house. Open it only if the dreams become unbearable. I turned the box over in my hands. It was made of polished obsidian with silver hinges, cool to the touch and faintly humming with contained magic. What's in it? A temporary solution. Wednesday's eyes met mine directly. A fragment of Adam's family protection magic. Use it only in extreme need, it has side effects. What kind of side effects? The kind my family finds invigorating but others might consider disturbing. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Dreams of ancestral crypts, temporary communion with the deceased, possible physical manifestations of your darker impulses. Nothing permanent. Right. Only in extreme need. Got it. I carefully tucked the box into my pocket, not entirely sure I'd ever dare to open it. As students packed for the holidays, an unexpected complication arose. I had the vision of Mr. Weasley being attacked by Nagini at the Department of Mysteries, leading to his rescue but raising serious questions about my mental connection to Voldemort. Dumbledore arranged for emergency occlumency lessons with Snape starting after the break. The night before departing Hogwarts, I found a note under my pillow. The attack confirms my suspicions. The connection is being deliberately manipulated. Be wary of what you see, especially at the Department of Mysteries. I'll contact you during the break through unconventional means. Sure enough, 3 days into the holiday at Grimmauld Place, I woke to find a raven perched on my headboard, watching me with intelligent eyes. It dropped a sealed letter onto my chest before flying to the window, clearly waiting for a reply. The letter contained detailed instructions for strengthening my mental defenses, along with news that made my blood run cold. My family archives confirm our worst fears. Voldemort has created multiple Horcruxes, not just one. This explains his unnatural connection to death magic. Your scar connects you to his fractured soul, but you're not a true Horcrux, a critical distinction that may save your life. The Department of Mysteries contains records of all prophecies. The one about you and Voldemort is what he seeks, but cannot retrieve himself. He will try to use you to get it. Trust Sirius, but be careful what you share with others. The Order doesn't understand what we're dealing with. This goes beyond conventional wizarding magic. I returned to Hogwarts a day early. Meet me in our usual place. I quickly penned a response, updating Wednesday about Dumbledore arranging occlumency lessons with Snape and my continuing dreams about the corridor. The raven took the letter and disappeared into the snowy sky. Sirius found me watching it go. Secret correspondence, Harry, he asked with a knowing smile. Anyone interesting? Just, a friend from school. I hesitated, then asked, Sirius, did my parents ever mention a family called Adams? The change in his expression was immediate, surprise followed by careful neutrality. Where did you hear that name? There's a student at Hogwarts, Wednesday Adams. She showed me a photograph of my parents visiting her family before they died. Sirius sank onto the window seat beside me. The Adams family. I haven't heard that name in years. They're not part of our wizarding community, not exactly. They practice older magic, predating the Ministry's classifications. Wednesday said my father made some kind of blood pact with her family. That sounds like James, Sirius said with a sad smile. Always looking for additional protection for you and Lily. After the prophecy, he became desperate. Explored avenues most wizards would avoid. So it's true. They have some obligation to protect me. If James made a blood pact with the Adamses, then yes, it's absolutely binding. Sirius looked troubled. But Harry, their methods can be extreme. Their understanding of right and wrong doesn't always align with conventional morality. I've noticed, I said dryly. Just be careful, Sirius advised. The Adamses aren't evil, far from it, actually. They're fiercely protective of their own. But their magic comes from different sources than ours, follows different rules. I thought about Wednesday's casual references to death magic, about things' uncanny abilities, about the way plants and animals seem to respond to her commands. I think she's trying to help, I said finally. In her own way. Sirius nodded slowly. Then accept the help, but keep your eyes open. And Harry? If she's truly honored the Adams side of the blood pact, she'll be prepared to go much further than you might expect to keep you safe. The conversation lingered in my mind throughout the remainder of the holidays. By the time we returned to Hogwarts, I was both eager and apprehensive about continuing my work with Wednesday, especially in light of the upcoming occlumency lessons with Snape. True to her word, Wednesday had arrived early. I found her waiting in our usual spot in the room of requirement, which had transformed into a space that resembled a Victorian parlor crossed with an alchemist's laboratory. Your holiday was eventful, she observed as I entered. That's one way of putting it, I agreed, dropping into an armchair. Snape starts occlumency lessons tomorrow. Dumbledore's orders. Problematic. Wednesday frowned. Conventional occlumency could interfere with the protections we've established. What do you mean? Your connection to Voldemort is unique, not just mental but soul-based. She began arranging strange-looking objects on a table. Snape will teach barriers that block mental intrusions but might inadvertently strengthen the soul connection. So what do we do? Adapt. Wednesday handed me a small vial of silvery liquid. This contains essence of lunar moths bred in an Addams family crypt. Take 3 drops before each session with Snape. It will create a partition in your mind. Let him teach the outer layer while preserving our work on the deeper levels. I eyed the vial skeptically. Will it have any side effects? Possibly enhanced dream recall and a temporary affinity for nocturnal creatures. She shrugged slightly. Nothing concerning. Right. I pocketed the vial. Sirius confirmed what you told me about the blood pact, by the way. He seemed worried about it. With good reason. Blood pacts with my family are binding in ways that transcend conventional magic. Wednesday's dark eyes fixed on mine. If you die while under our protection, consequences ripple through both bloodlines. What kind of consequences? Nothing as simple as death, she said, her voice taking on an almost reverent quality. Something far more interesting. Before I could press for details, she changed the subject. The occlumency lessons create an opportunity. While Snape focuses on your mental defenses, we can work on something more important. More important than keeping Voldemort out of my head. Keeping you out of the Department of Mysteries. Wednesday pulled out an old book, its cover made of what looked uncomfortably like human skin. Voldemort wants you to go there, to retrieve the prophecy he cannot touch himself. We need to make him believe he's succeeding while actually leading him into a trap. How exactly do we do that? By giving him what he wants, or what he thinks he wants. A rare, cold smile curved Wednesday's lips. My family specializes in deception, Harry Potter. By the time we're finished, even Voldemort won't know what's real and what's nightmare. With that ominous pronouncement, our work for the new term began, more complex and dangerous than anything we'd attempted before, with stakes that grew higher as Umbridge's power at Hogwarts increased and Voldemort's presence in my dreams became more insistent. Yet despite the growing darkness, I found myself strangely comforted by Wednesday's unwavering presence. She moved through Hogwarts like a shadow, defending Harry Potter in her own peculiar way, and every bully who crossed her path came to regret it deeply. Chapter 2, Shadows and Spells. January hit Hogwarts with a vengeance. Snow piled against the castle walls, and bitter winds howled through the corridors. Most students huddled in common rooms during free periods, but not me. I trudged through the dungeons 3 times a week for remedial potions, Snape's cover story for our occlumency lessons. Clear your mind, Potter. Snape snapped for the dozenth time. You're not even trying. I gritted my teeth as he invaded my memories again. The drops from Wednesday's veil had created a strange sensation, like my thoughts were organized in layers, with recent memories floating on top while deeper ones remained submerged. Snape ripped through the surface thoughts, classes, homework, arguments with Umbridge. Pathetic, he sneered, lowering his wand. The Dark Lord would tear through these defenses like tissue paper. What Snape didn't realize was that I was deliberately keeping him in the shallows. The deeper memories, Wednesday's training, the Addams family connection, our plans for the Department of Mysteries, remained untouched behind the partition she'd created. I left his office with a pounding headache but a small sense of victory. Outside, a shadow detached itself from an alcove. Wednesday fell into step beside me. He's not getting through, I confirmed quietly. Good. She glanced at my face. But the sessions are taking a toll. Come with me. I followed her to the 7th floor, where the room of requirement transformed into something resembling a Victorian conservatory filled with plants I'd never seen, flowers that pulsed like beating hearts and vines that reached toward us with deliberate purpose. What is all this? Family heirlooms. Wednesday gestured to a chair positioned beneath a particularly menacing-looking plant with dark purple pods. Sit. The Addams migraine leech will help. The what now? Don't worry. It only consumes pain, not brain matter. She paused. Usually. Before I could object, she tapped the plant with her wand. The pods unfurled, extending tendrils that hovered over my head like curious fingers. Stay still, Wednesday instructed. It needs to locate the source of your pain. A tendril brushed my scar, and instantly, blessed coolness spread through my aching head. The plant's pods darkened as they absorbed the pain, and I sighed in relief. Better? Wednesday asked. Much. Thanks. I studied her face. How did the occlumency lessons go with Snape? I've never had one. What? I sat up straighter, dislodging a tendril that gave an indignant twitch. But you know all about mental barriers and soul shielding. Adam's family methods differ from conventional wizarding techniques. Wednesday moved to a workbench covered with strange implements and began grinding something in a mortar. We learn to compartmentalize our minds from childhood. It's necessary when you grow up surrounded by entities most wizards would consider nightmares. Like what? A ghost of a smile. Our house has residents. Some have been with us for centuries. Others come and go. They're mostly harmless unless provoked. Mostly harmless. Great. Wednesday approached with a small bowl of dark paste. This will strengthen the partition in your mind. Apply it to your temples before sleep. What's in it? I asked suspiciously. Better not to ask. She set the bowl aside. More importantly, we need to discuss Dumbledore's army. You've been coming to meetings, I pointed out. Yes, but your current approach is insufficient. Defensive spells are useful, but limited. Wednesday pulled out a thin, ancient-looking book. You need to prepare them for real combat, not just classroom dueling. That's exactly what we're doing. No, you're teaching ministry-approved defenses against theoretical threats. Her dark eyes locked with mine. Voldemort won't fight fair, Harry. Neither should you. So what are you suggesting? That I teach dark arts to the DA? Not dark. Different. She opened the book to a marked page. My family has collected magic from cultures across the world for generations. Many powerful techniques aren't classified as dark simply because the ministry doesn't understand them. I skimmed the page. It contained instructions for something called shadow walking, a method of concealment that didn't require an invisibility cloak or disillusionment charm. This isn't on any exam, I said dubiously. Neither is surviving Voldemort. Wednesday closed the book. You don't need to teach everyone everything. But your closest allies should have every advantage. I'll think about it, I promised, though not entirely convinced. Good. She handed me the paste. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be eventful. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, Educational Decree number 26 appeared on the common room notice board. Teachers were forbidden from giving students any information not strictly related to their subjects. She's cutting off all our sources of information, Hermione fumed as we headed to breakfast. First student organizations, now this. I bet the teachers find ways around it, Ron said. McGonagall won't let Umbridge push her around. In the Great Hall, a crowd had gathered around the Slytherin table. Pansy Parkinson was sobbing hysterically while Draco tried to comfort her. What's going on? I asked Neville, who was watching the scene with barely suppressed glee. Pansy woke up this morning with all her hair gone, he whispered. Completely bald. Madame Pomfrey says it'll grow back eventually, but not for weeks. What happened? Some kind of jinx. That's the thing, nobody knows. Her dormmates swear they didn't do it, and there's no sign of anyone entering the Slytherin girls' dormitory. I scanned the hall until I found Wednesday at the Ravenclaw table, calmly buttering toast while reading a book. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she had anything to do with Pansy's predicament, but I knew better. Serves her right, Ron said, watching Pansy. After what she said about Hermione's teeth yesterday. I remembered, Pansy had loudly compared Hermione to a beaver during potions. Wednesday had been at the next table, seemingly absorbed in her work, but I'd noticed her glance up briefly. By lunchtime, the story had evolved. Apparently, Pansy's hairbrush had been hexed, not just to remove her hair, but to form the fallen strands into the word bully on her pillow. The hair wouldn't burn, vanish, or be moved by any spell the Slytherins tried. Brilliant bit of magic, Hermione admitted grudgingly as we discussed it in charms. Very specific targeting, it only affected the person who'd been bullying others. Wonder who did it, Ron mused, glancing at me significantly. I said nothing, but made a mental note to ask Wednesday about it later. The opportunity came during that evening's DA meeting in the room of requirement. We were practicing patron uses, with several members making significant progress. Silver animals bounded around the room, Hermione's otter swam through the air, Ron's terrier barked silently, and Luna's hare leaped joyfully from wall to wall. Wednesday, as usual, wasn't participating in the standard exercises. She sat cross-legged in a corner, eyes closed, palms flat on the floor, a pose I'd seen her adopt before. "What exactly are you doing?" I asked, squatting beside her. "Listening to the castle," she replied without opening her eyes. "Hogwarts has secrets even the Marauder's map doesn't show." "Like what?" One eye opened. "Like how to access the Slytherin dormitories without a password." "So it was you, Pansy's hare." She needed to understand consequences. Wednesday rose smoothly to her feet. "The spell is selective. It only affects true bullies. That's, actually impressive magic." I couldn't help but admire the precision of it. "Not that I'm encouraging you to hex more students," I added hastily. "Of course not." The ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Though you might find fewer problems with the inquisitorial squad in the coming weeks." Before I could question this ominous statement, shouts of excitement drew our attention. Neville had finally produced a corporeal Patronus, a large, impressive tortoise that moved with surprising speed around the room. "I did it," he cried, face flushed with triumph. "I really did it." "Brilliant, Neville," I called, genuinely pleased. Wednesday studied the silver tortoise with her head tilted slightly. "Strength in stillness. Appropriate." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Patronus forms reveal aspects of ourselves we often don't recognize." She nodded toward Neville, who was beaming as others congratulated him. "His greatest strength isn't aggression or speed, it's endurance and protection." I glanced around at the other patron uses. "What about mine? What does a stag mean?" "Pride. Nobility. Sacrifice." Wednesday's dark eyes met mine. "Your father's form, yes." "How did you know that?" "Family records." She looked away. "The Adamses keep detailed accounts of those under our protection." A thought struck me. "What's your Patronus?" "You never attempt the charm in meetings." "I told you, I find other emotions more useful than joy." "But if you could cast one, what would it be?" Wednesday considered this. "Something misunderstood, I imagine." "A raven. Perhaps a black widow spider." "You can't have a spider Patronus," Ron interjected, having approached close enough to overhear. "Can you?" He looked mildly horrified at the possibility. "The form reflects the caster's inner nature," Wednesday replied. "Conventional limitations rarely apply to my family." Ron edged slightly away, clearly disturbed by the idea of a spider Patronus bounding around the room. As the meeting concluded, I pulled Wednesday aside. "About what you said yesterday, teaching different kinds of magic to the DA. You've reconsidered?" "Maybe for a small group, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, Ginny. The ones most likely to stand with me if." I trailed off, not wanting to voice what we both knew was coming. Wednesday nodded. "A wise choice. Tomorrow night, after curfew. Bring them to the room of requirement." The next day brought a new challenge. Rita Skeeter had published an article claiming I was disturbed and dangerous, citing my outbursts in class and delusional claims about Voldemort's return. By lunch, half the school was whispering as I passed. "Ignore them," Hermione advised. "We know the truth." "Doesn't make it easier," I muttered, acutely aware of the stares. In potions that afternoon, Malfoy took particular pleasure in reading choice excerpts aloud whenever Snape's back was turned. Sources close to Potter suggest he regularly collapses, clutching his scar, and has been heard speaking in tongues, he read, smirking at Crabbe and Goyle. I gripped my knife so hard my knuckles turned white, struggling to focus on cutting my daisy roots. Just ignore him, Hermione whispered. Perhaps, Malfoy continued, raising his voice slightly, St. Mungo's should reserve a permanent bed next to the Longbottoms, another family who suffered delusions about the Dark Lord. Neville went rigid beside me. Before I could react, a loud hissing came from Malfoy's cauldron. He turned just as it erupted, showering him with half-finished shrinking solution. Chaos erupted. Snape rushed over as Malfoy howled, his face and hands visibly shrinking. Several Slytherins backed away, knocking over their own cauldrons in the process. Hospital wing. Now. Snape barked, as Crabbe and Goyle hauled a rapidly diminishing Malfoy toward the door. In the confusion, I glanced across the room. Wednesday stood calmly beside her perfectly brewed potion, eyes meeting mine briefly before returning to her work. I noticed a small vial disappearing into her sleeve. Later that evening, I recounted the incident to Ron, who had missed potions due to a Quidditch practice scheduled by Angelina. Wish I'd seen it, he sighed wistfully. Malfoy with a tiny little head. It wasn't an accident, I said quietly. Wednesday did something to his cauldron. Brilliant. After what he said about Neville's parents. Ron shook his head admiringly. She's scary, but useful. That's one way of putting it. I checked my watch. Come on, we're meeting her and the others in 10 minutes. We found Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and Luna already waiting outside the room of requirement. Wednesday arrived precisely on time, carrying what appeared to be a small wooden chest. What's this about, Harry? Ginny asked as the room transformed at Wednesday's request into a space unlike any I'd seen it create before, a circular chamber with dark wooden paneling, strange symbols carved into the floor, and walls lined with artifacts that seemed to shift when not looked at directly. Additional training, I explained. Beyond what we're doing in the DA. Wednesday's going to teach us some different magic, Hermione added, eyeing the room with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Not ministry approved, I hope, Luna said brightly. Daddy says the ministry deliberately suppresses the most useful spells. Your father is more perceptive than people give him credit for, Wednesday commented, opening her chest. The magic I'm about to show you predates the ministry's classification system. It's neither light nor dark by their definitions, just effective. She removed several items from the chest, a black candle, a small silver knife, a vial of reddish powder, and what looked disturbingly like a mummified hand. Bloody hell, Ron muttered. Is that a real hand of glory? Wednesday confirmed. A family heirloom. Provides light only the holder can see, useful for moving undetected. That's dark magic, Hermione protested. It's made from the hand of a hanged murderer. Actually, this one belonged to my great-uncle Corvus. He donated it to the family collection after an unfortunate gardening accident. Wednesday placed the hand carefully on a stand. He was quite proud that it continued to be useful after his death. Neville looked slightly ill. You mean your family just harvests parts from dead relatives? Only with prior consent, Wednesday said, as if this made it perfectly reasonable. I cleared my throat. Maybe we should start with something less controversial. As you wish. Wednesday put the hand of glory aside and picked up the candle instead. We'll begin with shadow walking, a technique for moving undetected. Unlike disillusionment charms, it can't be detected by hominum revelio or similar spells. She lit the black candle with a wave of her hand, not her wand, and the flame burned an unnatural blue. Step into the circle, one at a time. When the candle smoke touches you, focus on becoming one with your shadow. Not invisible, merged with the darkness that's already there. Luna stepped forward first, fearless as always. The blue smoke swirled around her, and she closed her eyes in concentration. Slowly, remarkably, her outline began to blur, as if she were fading into the background. Excellent, Wednesday approved. You have a natural affinity for between spaces. One by one, we each tried the technique. Neville struggled initially but eventually managed a partial fade. Ron kept sneezing from the smoke, breaking his concentration. Hermione, predictably, analyzed the process so intensely she nearly overthought it before finally succeeding. When my turn came, the smoke felt cool against my skin, carrying a scent like night-blooming flowers and something else unidentifiable. I closed my eyes, thinking about shadows, how they existed in the boundary between light and dark. To my surprise, the technique felt natural, as if I'd done it before. "Good," Wednesday said when I opened my eyes. "You're almost completely merged. With practice, you'll be able to move through shadows like walking through open doors." "This is brilliant," Ginny said, examining her semi-transparent hand. "Why doesn't everyone learn this?" The Ministry classified shadow magic as questionable in 1749 after an incident involving the minister's daughter and a particularly shadowy corridor. Wednesday extinguished the candle. "The magic itself isn't dark, but it's difficult to regulate, which makes bureaucrats nervous." Over the next 2 hours, she taught us several more techniques: how to communicate through reflective surfaces, how to temporarily imbue objects with intent, and a particularly useful method for detecting lies that involved a drop of blood and a whispered phrase. "Blood magic?" Hermione questioned, looking uneasy. "Isn't that crossing a line?" "Blood carries power," Wednesday replied simply. "All magic has a cost. Being honest about that price is safer than pretending otherwise." By the time we finished, it was well past midnight. Despite initial reservations, everyone had participated fully. Even Hermione seemed reluctantly impressed by the practical applications of Wednesday's unorthodox methods. "Same time next week?" I suggested as we prepared to leave in small groups. Wednesday nodded. "Bring something personal from each of you, an item you've had for at least a year. Nothing valuable or irreplaceable." "What for?" Ron asked suspiciously. "Protection charms." She began packing her chest. "And Harry, stay a moment." Once the others had gone, Wednesday turned to me with unusual intensity. "You felt comfortable with the shadow magic." "Unusually so for a first attempt." "It seemed familiar somehow," I admitted. "I suspected as much." She pulled an envelope from her pocket. "This arrived by Raven last night. From my mother." The letter inside contained spidery handwriting similar to Wednesday's but more elaborate. "Daughter, our suspicions are confirmed. The Potter boys' affinity for death magic is not coincidental. James Potter's request for protection went deeper than we realized. The night they visited, Lily Potter allowed me to perform the Blood Moon Blessing, an ancient Adam's rite normally reserved for family. It creates a shadow bond between the recipient and our ancestral protectors. This explains why our family felt the pact activate so strongly last June. Harry Potter carries Adam's shadows within him, dormant until now. They awakened when Voldemort used his blood in the resurrection ritual, creating a threefold connection: Harry to Voldemort, Voldemort to Harry, and both to the Adams lineage. Guide him to understand his shadow self. It may be his greatest protection against what comes. Morticia Adams' P.S. Grandmama sends a vial of her special toadstool brew. For emergencies only, it causes temporary death followed by heightened awareness. Use with extreme caution. I read the letter twice, trying to absorb its implications. Your mother blessed me as a baby with shadow protectors. The Blood Moon Blessing is one of our most sacred rites, Wednesday said solemnly. It's why I can sense when you're in danger, why you took so naturally to shadow magic. Part of you already belongs to the spaces between light and dark. That's... I struggled for words. A lot to process. It also explains something else. Wednesday's dark eyes fixed on mine. Why Voldemort couldn't kill you that night. My mother's blessing created a shadow echo, a space where death couldn't fully enter. Your mother's sacrifice activated and directed it. So my survival wasn't just my mother's protection. It was both. Her love and our family's shadow magic, working together. Wednesday took back the letter. This changes our approach. You don't just need to learn these techniques, you need to awaken what's already inside you. She reached out, her cool fingers touching my scar lightly. There's a battle happening within you, Harry Potter. 3 magical lineages, Potter, Riddle, and Adams, all claiming territory. We need to ensure the right one wins. The next morning, I woke feeling more rested than I had in weeks. No nightmares, no glimpses of the Department of Mysteries corridor. Whether from Wednesday's training or the revelation about my connection to her family, something had shifted. Breakfast brought a surprise. Umbridge was absent from the staff table. Whispers spread through the great hall until Professor McGonagall stood to make an announcement. Professor Umbridge is indisposed this morning, she informed us, not looking particularly concerned. Classes will proceed with substitute teachers. Wonder what happened to the old toad? Ron mused through a mouthful of eggs. I glanced at the Ravenclaw table, where Wednesday sat reading a letter, a raven perched casually on her shoulder despite the school rule about owls being the only male carriers permitted. Later, in herbology, I overheard Ernie Macmillan telling Hannah Abbott that Umbridge had been found frozen in terror outside her quarters, claiming her mirrors had shown her abominations all night long. Reckon she's finally cracked, Ernie concluded. Pomfrey gave her a calming draft strong enough to knock out a hippogriff. Professor Sprout cleared her throat meaningfully, and everyone returned to repotting their fanged geraniums. I noticed Neville working with unusual confidence, handling the snapping flowers with practiced ease. You're getting good at this, I commented. Wednesday's been helping me, he replied, surprising me. She knows loads about dangerous plants. Said my greenhouse management skills would be invaluable when civilization collapses. I smiled despite myself. That sounded exactly like Wednesday's brand of encouragement. After class, I found Hermione waiting with an anxious expression. Harry, we need to talk. About Wednesday. What about her? I've been researching. She lowered her voice as other students passed. The Addams family isn't just unusual, they're legendary in certain circles. There are accounts of them dating back centuries, always with the same descriptions: pale, dark-haired, obsessed with death and pain. Your point? They're not just eccentric wizards, Harry. Some sources suggest they're not entirely human. I thought about Wednesday's casual wandless magic, her affinity for shadows, the family's apparently voluntary donations of body parts after death. Does it matter? I finally asked. She's helping us. I just think we should be careful about what we're getting into. Hermione bit her lip. The magic she's teaching us, it feels different. Powerful, yes, but not dark, I insisted. Different. Magic always has consequences, Harry. I'm just worried about what these might be. I couldn't entirely dismiss Hermione's concerns, but after learning about my own connection to the Addams family magic, I felt less troubled by it. Whatever Wednesday was, whatever her family represented, they had protected me when I was most vulnerable. The DA meetings continued through January, growing more focused as we progressed from basic defensive spells to more complex combat techniques. Meanwhile, our smaller group, which had dubbed itself the Shadow Circle, at Luna's suggestion, met weekly to learn Wednesday's alternative methods. These sessions quickly became my favorite part of the week. Free from ministry-approved constraints, we explored magic that felt both ancient and immediate. Wednesday proved a surprisingly patient teacher, adapting her explanations to each person's strengths. Luna took to the techniques most naturally, particularly those involving perception beyond normal senses. Neville excelled at earth-based magic, coaxing plants to grow, move, or change according to his will. Ginny mastered protective wards with remarkable speed, while Ron, to everyone's surprise including his own, showed talent for strategy-based magic involving patterns and predictions. Hermione struggled initially, her analytical mind resistant to Wednesday's more intuitive approach. But once she began viewing the techniques as an alternative magical system with its own internal logic, she progressed rapidly. As for me, I found myself drawn most strongly to the shadow magic Wednesday had introduced first. Moving between darkness and light felt instinctive, as if I were remembering rather than learning. "It's your shadow bond," Wednesday explained during one session. "The Adam's blessing created pathways between your magic and the shadow realm. Is that why I can sense Voldemort's emotions? Because of these pathways?" "Partly." She guided my hands through a complex pattern that left trails of darkness in the air. "But that connection runs both ways. What he can access, you can access too, if you know how." This comment lingered with me, raising possibilities I hadn't considered before. If I could look into Voldemort's mind as he looked into mine, what might I discover? February arrived with howling blizzards that kept most students indoors. The educational decrees continued to multiply. Umbridge, recovered from her mirror incident but noticeably jumpier, seemed determined to control every aspect of Hogwarts life. The inquisitorial squad grew bolder in their enforcement, particularly targeting suspected DA members. Yet they encountered peculiar obstacles. Crabbe developed an embarrassing stutter whenever he tried to report a rule violation. Goyle found himself inexplicably lost between classes, ending up in broom cupboards or empty classrooms with no memory of entering. Pansy's hair, which had finally regrown, changed color to match whatever insult she had most recently uttered. I didn't need to ask who was responsible. Wednesday's protection extended beyond me personally to encompass those I cared about, though her methods remained as unsettling as they were effective. One evening after dinner, I was heading to the library when I spotted Draco and two other Slytherins cornering a small Hufflepuff boy near the Transfiguration courtyard. "Hand it over, Hughes," Draco demanded. "Unauthorized items get confiscated." "It's just a letter from my mum," the boy protested, clutching a yellow envelope. "Please, rules are rules," Draco smirked, reaching for the letter. I started forward, wand ready, when a quiet voice spoke from the shadows. "Interesting choice, Draco." Wednesday stepped into view, and all three Slytherins visibly tensed. "This doesn't concern you, Adams," Draco said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Doesn't it?" She moved closer, her steps making no sound on the stone floor. "Tell me, how's your father doing these days? Still having those nightmares about Azkaban?" The color drained from Draco's face. "What are you talking about?" "Premonitions run in my family." Wednesday's dark eyes fixed on him. "Last night, I dreamed of your father in a cell. The Dementors were particularly drawn to him. Something about guilt, I believe." "You're lying," Draco hissed, but I could see fear in his eyes. "Perhaps." She shrugged slightly. "Or perhaps not. Dreams have power. Especially Adam's dreams." A moment of tense silence followed before Draco muttered something to his companions. All three backed away, then hurried down the corridor without another word. The Hufflepuff boy stared at Wednesday with wide eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Be more careful where you read personal correspondence," she advised him, before turning to me. "You can come out now, Harry." I stepped from behind the pillar where I'd paused. "How did you know I was there?" "Your shadow recognizes mine." She nodded to the retreating Slytherins. "They're becoming more desperate. Umbridge is pressuring them to find concrete evidence of the DA." "What was that about Malfoy's father having nightmares?" "A calculated guess." Wednesday's lips curved slightly. "Though if he wasn't having them before, he might start now." I couldn't help but grin. "You're terrifying, you know that." "Thank you." She accepted this as the compliment it was intended to be. "Come. There's something I need to show you." She led me through a series of corridors I'd never explored before, despite 5 years at Hogwarts and extensive use of the Marauder's map. We descended a narrow spiral staircase hidden behind a tapestry, emerging into a small circular room with a domed ceiling painted with constellations. "What is this place?" I asked, amazed. It's not on the Marauder's map. The Star Chamber. It appears on no maps and can't be found by seeking it directly. Wednesday moved to the center of the room, where a shallow basin resembling a pensieve sat on a pedestal. It was created by Rowena Ravenclaw and Salazar Slytherin working together, a fact most histories omit. How did you find it? I told you, I listened to the castle. She gestured to the basin. This is the astral pool. It allows communication across vast distances, without ministry detection. The liquid in the basin wasn't silver like a pensieve's contents, but deep indigo, with points of light that mirrored the constellations above. My family has been trying to send you a message for weeks, Wednesday explained. But Umbridge has been monitoring all conventional communications. This is the only secure method. She sprinkled a dark powder over the surface, and the lights in the pool rearranged themselves. An image formed, a pale, elegant woman with long black hair, seated in a high-backed chair. I recognized her from the photograph as Wednesday's mother. Ah, there you are, Wednesday dear, the woman said, her voice rich and cultured. And young Mr. Potter. How wonderful to finally speak with you directly. Mother, Wednesday greeted. You received my updates? Yes, darling. Your father and I are most impressed with your progress. Morticia Adams turned her attention to me. Harry Potter. You have your mother's eyes, and more importantly, her determination. How are you finding the shadow techniques? They're coming naturally, I admitted. Mrs. Adams, your letter mentioned a blood moon blessing you performed when I was a baby. Indeed. Your mother was remarkably open-minded about protective magic, unlike many in the wizarding world. Her red-nailed fingers stroked the head of a strange plant beside her that appeared to be purring. What we didn't anticipate was how that blessing would interact with what happened later, both your mother's sacrifice and Voldemort's use of your blood. What exactly does it mean that I have Adam's shadows in me? Simply put, you carry a fragment of our family's ancestral protection. It's why Wednesday can sense your danger, why certain of our techniques come easily to you. Morticia's expression grew serious. But it's also why your connection to Voldemort is so complex. You stand at a magical crossroads, Harry Potter. Wednesday leaned forward. Have you found anything about the artifacts? Yes, and it's worse than we feared. Morticia reached for something off-screen and held up an ancient book. Voldemort didn't create just one Horcrux, but several. The exact number remains unclear, but our sources suggest at least 5, possibly 7. Horcruxes? I questioned. Wednesday mentioned those, objects containing pieces of Voldemort's soul. Precisely. The most profound violation of death's natural boundaries. Morticia's voice held surprising passion. The Addams family has always respected death, lived alongside it, even danced with it, but never cheated it. What Voldemort has done disturbs the very fabric between worlds. That's why the veil in the Department of Mysteries is unstable, Wednesday added. His fractured soul has created ripples in the boundary. The Department of Mysteries, I murmured. My dreams keep showing me a corridor there, a door I need to open. He's trying to lure you, Morticia confirmed. To retrieve the prophecy. But there's something else there he doesn't know about, something connected to the veil that could help him recover what he lost. Which is? His humanity, Wednesday said quietly. What little he had to begin with. Morticia nodded. There's an artifact stored near the veil, the Resurrection Stone. It's part of a set of legendary objects called the Deathly Hallows. Combined with the Elder Wand, which he's already seeking, it would give him unprecedented power over death itself. My head spun with this new information. So he wants me to get the prophecy from the Department of Mysteries, but doesn't know this Resurrection Stone is there too. Correct. And we must keep it that way. Morticia looked at her daughter. Wednesday, the next phase of your mission is critical. You must ensure Harry masters enough shadow magic to shield his mind completely, then use the connection to feed Voldemort false information. A shadow deception, Wednesday nodded. It's risky. Wait, I interrupted. You want me to deliberately connect with Voldemort's mind? After all the work to keep him out of mine? Not connect, redirect, Morticia clarified. Like a river changing course. You'll guide his intrusions toward what you want him to see, while keeping your true thoughts protected. The image in the pool began to flicker. Our time grows short, Morticia said. The stars are shifting. Wednesday, use the box I sent if necessary. Harry, remember, the shadow knows no fear. It simply is. The pool darkened, Morticia's image fading into the indigo liquid. Wednesday passed her hand over the surface, dissolving the remaining light patterns. Now you understand the full scope of what we're facing. I sank onto a stone bench, overwhelmed. Horcruxes, Deathly Hallows, shadow deceptions. It's a lot to take in. We'll proceed carefully. One step at a time. She sat beside me. First, we strengthen your shadow barriers. Then we practice controlled openings, like a door you can open and close at will. And if I can't master it? You can. For the first time, Wednesday placed her hand over mine, a gesture of unexpected reassurance. The Adam's blessing in your blood responds to intent. You simply need to learn its language. Her touch was cool but not unpleasant, and I felt a strange resonance, as if something in me recognized something in her. Not attraction, exactly, but kinship. The sense of belonging to the same magical current. All right, I agreed. When do we start? We already have. She stood. The shadows have been watching you since the day I arrived. They know you now. It's time you knew them too. That night, I experienced a different kind of dream. Not the Department of Mysteries corridor, not Voldemort's emotions, but something older and stranger. I stood in a vast garden beneath a full moon, surrounded by plants I'd never seen, flowers that glowed softly, trees with reaching branches that seemed almost conscious. In the center of the garden stood a gazebo draped with dark vines, and within it, a family gathered around a small cradle. I approached silently, drawn by an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Inside the cradle lay a baby, myself, I somehow knew, though I couldn't see clearly. A tall, elegant woman, Morticia Adams, stood at the head, her hands extended over the infant. Beside her stood the mustached man from the photograph, solemn but proud, and several other figures half hidden in shadow. Blood of our blood, Morticia intoned, her voice resonating in a way that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. Shadow of our shadow. We extend the protection of the Adams line to this child, born of courage and marked for greatness. She pricked her finger with a silver pin, allowing a single drop of blood to fall onto the baby's forehead, exactly where my scar would later form. By moon and star, by grave and bone, by the ancient pact between life and death, we bind our shadows to yours. Where darkness threatens, our darkness shall defend. The others repeated the ritual, each adding a drop of blood that shimmered silver in the moonlight. The drops didn't fall onto the skin but hovered just above it, forming a pattern like a constellation. When death comes seeking before its time, Morticia continued, let our shadows stand between. When soul meets soul in unwanted bond, let our darkness recognize its own. The blood constellation suddenly sank into the baby's skin, disappearing completely. A ripple seemed to pass through the garden, the conscious plants bending as if in acknowledgement. It is done, Morticia said softly. The Potter child carries Adam's shadows now. May they serve him well when darkness falls. I woke with a gasp, my scar not hurting but tingling with an unfamiliar sensation, like cool fingers tracing its outline. The dream hadn't felt like a nightmare or a vision, but a memory, one I couldn't possibly actually have, yet somehow did. Reaching for my glasses, I noticed something on my bedside table that hadn't been there when I went to sleep, a small black flower with petals that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Beside it lay a note in Wednesday's spidery handwriting, the shadows remember. Now you do too. Where the night orchid close, it strengthens blood memories. I picked up the flower carefully. Despite its darkness, it felt vibrantly alive against my fingers. Following an instinct I didn't quite understand, I tucked it into the leather cord Hermione had given me for Christmas, creating an impromptu necklace I could wear beneath my robes. As the flower settled against my skin, a sense of calm clarity washed over me. The connection to Voldemort didn't vanish, but it changed, becoming less an invasion and more a distant awareness I could choose to acknowledge or ignore. For the first time since the graveyard, I felt in control of my own mind. February gave way to March, bringing slightly warmer weather and renewed determination to our training. The DA meetings grew larger despite Umbridge's best efforts to discover us, while our shadow circle sessions became increasingly advanced. Wednesday pushed us harder each week, introducing techniques that seemed impossible until suddenly they weren't. We learned to create shadow duplicates that could distract pursuers, to speak through reflections across different rooms, to sense danger before it manifested. Hermione still questioned the origins of some practices but couldn't argue with their effectiveness. Even Ron, initially the most skeptical, had embraced Wednesday's teachings after his shadow concealment technique saved him from detection by Filch during a close call. Meanwhile, my private sessions with Wednesday focused on the shadow deception Morticia had described, learning to guide Voldemort's mental intrusions toward false information while protecting my true thoughts. Imagine your mind as a mansion, Wednesday instructed during one particularly intensive session. The rooms you want him to see are brightly lit, doors wide open. The ones you need to protect are shadowed, hidden behind walls that look like ordinary shadows to anyone who doesn't know better. The technique was exhausting but effective. My nightmares about the Department of Mysteries continued, but now I controlled which aspects of the corridor Voldemort could see through my eyes. Under Wednesday's guidance, I began constructing an elaborate false narrative, one that would eventually lead him into a trap. The timing must be precise, she cautioned. Too obvious, and he'll suspect deception. Too subtle, and he might miss it entirely. What exactly are we leading him toward? I asked, wiping sweat from my forehead after a particularly demanding practice. A moment when he believes you're vulnerable but you're actually prepared. Wednesday's dark eyes held mine. Every great victory requires perfect theatrical timing. Outside our private sessions, life at Hogwarts grew increasingly tense. Umbridge's power expanded with each educational decree, and her methods became more desperate. When she banned the Quibbler after Luna's father published my interview about Voldemort's return, copies began appearing throughout the castle through means no one could trace. The Inquisitorial squad doubled their efforts to catch DA members, but encountered bizarre obstacles. Filch reported hearing whispers from empty corridors. Mrs. Norris refused to enter certain hallways. Suits of armor mysteriously repositioned themselves to block pursuit during critical moments. And throughout it all, Wednesday Addams moved like a shadow herself, rarely drawing attention yet somehow always present when needed, her silent interventions protecting not just me but anyone who stood against Umbridge's regime. One afternoon in late March, I entered the library to find an unusual scene, Luna Lovegood and Wednesday sitting together at a table, heads bent over what appeared to be a large scrapbook. "Hello, Harry Potter," Luna greeted dreamily. "Wednesday is showing me her family album. Did you know her great-grandmother kept a pet vulture that could sense lies?" "I didn't," I admitted, sliding into a chair beside them. "Family research. Connection building," Wednesday corrected. "Luna understands the importance of ancestral magic." I glanced at the album, surprised to see moving photographs of what must be generations of the Addams family, all with the same pale skin, dark eyes, and solemn expressions, though their clothing spanned centuries of fashion. "My mother sent it," Wednesday explained. "For the ritual we'll perform at the spring equinox." "Ritual?" I questioned. "To strengthen your shadow bond." She turned a page, revealing a photograph that made me start in surprise. There, among the Addams ancestors, stood a man who could only be a Potter, the same untamable black hair, similar features to my father. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing to the figure. Hardwin Potter, circa 1718. Wednesday tapped the image. The first recorded interaction between our families. He married an Adams cousin, creating the initial blood connection that your parents later renewed. So I'm actually related to your family? Distantly. Most old wizarding families are interconnected. She studied me thoughtfully. But blood matters less than magical resonance. The Adams blessing recognized something compatible in your magical signature, like calls to like. Luna nodded seriously. That's why the shadow magic works so well for you, Harry. You're already part shadow. The comment should have sounded ridiculous, but after everything I'd learned, it made a strange kind of sense. My connection to Voldemort, my ability to speak Parseltongue, my comfort with Wednesday's unconventional magic, all pieces of a complex magical identity I was only beginning to understand. The equinox ritual will help clarify these connections, Wednesday continued. Separate what belongs to you naturally, what comes from Voldemort, and what derives from the Adams blessing. Is it dangerous? I asked, thinking of the numerous warnings about blood magic we'd received in defense against the dark arts. All meaningful magic carries risk, Wednesday replied. But we'll take precautions. Luna closed the album gently. I've offered to assist. The ritual works better with a neutral third party who can see beyond ordinary perception. Luna sees things others miss, Wednesday explained. Including shadow threads. I considered this new development. The prospect of a ritual involving blood magic and shadow manipulation would have terrified me months ago. Now, it felt like a necessary step, perhaps the only way to truly understand the magical crossroads Morticia had described. All right, I agreed. When and where? The astronomy tower. Midnight on the equinox. Wednesday's eyes held mine. Bring the night orchid and something of your mother's, if you have it. I don't have anything of hers, I admitted, a familiar pang of loss hitting me. Yes, you do, Luna said softly. Her protection lives in your blood, Harry. That's all you need. As the equinox approached, tensions within Hogwarts reached a breaking point. Umbridge's tyranny grew more pronounced, with students receiving increasingly harsh punishments for minor infractions. The DA meetings became our only refuge, a place where we could practice real defense and maintain morale. Then disaster struck. Somehow, Umbridge discovered the location of our meetings. Later, we would learn that Marietta Edgecombe had betrayed us under pressure, though the sneak pimples Hermione's jinx produced across her face ensured she regretted it immediately. The warning came just in time for most members to escape, but I lingered too long, ensuring others got away safely. As I finally prepared to flee, the door burst open to reveal Umbridge, flanked by the inquisitorial squad and a triumphant-looking Draco Malfoy. Well, Umbridge simpered. Mr. Potter. What a surprise. I gripped my wand, mind racing through escape options. Before I could act, a familiar monotone voice spoke from directly behind Umbridge. Professor. How fortunate I found you. Wednesday stood in the corridor, looking perfectly composed despite the chaos. Umbridge whirled, startled by her sudden appearance. Miss Adams. What are you doing here? Fulfilling my obligations as a prefect, Wednesday replied smoothly. I've just come from Professor Flitwick's office. He needs you immediately, something about an unauthorized portkey in the Ravenclaw common room. A portkey? Umbridge's eyes narrowed suspiciously. This is very convenient timing, Miss Adams. Isn't it? Wednesday agreed, her expression unreadable. Professor Flitwick seemed quite concerned. Mentioned ministry regulations and potential security breaches. Umbridge hesitated, clearly torn between capturing me and investigating another serious rule violation. Draco, take Potter to my office and guard him. The rest of you, search this room for evidence. She turned back to Wednesday. You'll accompany me to Ravenclaw Tower, Miss Adams. I find your story requires verification. Wednesday nodded, catching my eye briefly as Umbridge pushed past her. In that split-second glance, I read her intent clearly: create a diversion, find an opportunity to escape. Draco grabbed my arm roughly. Finally caught you, Potter. The High Inquisitor will have you expelled for this. He marched me toward Umbridge's office, wand trained on my back. As we walked, I noticed something odd: the corridors were unusually dark, the torches dimmer than normal. Shadows seemed to pool in corners and stretch across our path. What's with the lights? Draco muttered, looking around uneasily. I remained silent, recognizing Wednesday's influence. The shadows were responding to her command, even in her absence. Remembering our training, I focused on the darkness surrounding us, willing it to recognize me as Wednesday had taught. As we passed a particularly deep patch of shadow, I felt a familiar resonance, like a silent greeting. Without conscious decision, I stepped sideways into the darkness, using the shadow-walking technique we practiced so often. The effect was immediate. Draco's grip slid off my suddenly insubstantial arm, and I melted into the shadow as if it were a doorway. His shocked cry echoed as I moved through the darkness, emerging from another shadow 30 feet down the corridor. Potter! Draco shouted, spinning wildly, unable to comprehend my sudden disappearance. Where did you? I didn't wait to hear more, sprinting down a side passage and diving into another patch of darkness. This time, I visualized a specific destination: the 7th floor corridor outside the room of requirement. The shadow pulled me through a disorienting non-space before depositing me precisely where I'd intended. Gasping, I leaned against the wall, amazed at how instinctively I'd used the technique under pressure. The night orchid against my chest felt warm, almost pulsing with energy. Heavy footsteps approached, and I prepared to shadow walk again, but it was Ron and Hermione, looking frantic. Harry! Hermione exclaimed. We thought you'd been caught. I explained quickly. Wednesday created a diversion, and I escaped using shadow walking. Brilliant. Ron grinned. But we need to move, the inquisitorial squad is searching the whole castle. We should split up, Hermione suggested. Less conspicuous that way. We agreed to meet later in the common room and went our separate ways. I chose the route through the lesser-used East Wing, keeping to shadowy alcoves and using the techniques Wednesday had taught us to detect approaching danger. Turning a corner, I nearly collided with Neville, who was hurrying in the opposite direction. Harry, he whispered urgently. Umbridge is on the warpath. She tried to get into Ravenclaw Tower but Flitwick wouldn't let her in without evidence. She's furious. What about Wednesday? She was with Umbridge. That's why I was looking for you, Neville said grimly. They've taken her to Umbridge's office for questioning. Luna overheard and told me to find you. My stomach dropped. Wednesday had sacrificed herself to help me escape, again. I need to help her. How? Umbridge's office will be guarded. I touched the night orchid through my robes, feeling its response to my concern. I have an idea. But I'll need a distraction near her office in about 10 minutes. Leave it to me, Neville said with newfound confidence. I'll get Peeves involved. We separated, Neville heading toward the trophy room where Peeves often lurked, while I found a secluded alcove deep in shadow. Closing my eyes, I concentrated on the techniques Wednesday had taught me for communicating through reflective surfaces. Wednesday Adams, I whispered, picturing the ornamental mirror I knew hung in Umbridge's office. Shadow to shadow, reflection to reflection. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a radio finding the right frequency, I felt a connection click into place. Opening my eyes, I saw not the stone wall before me but Umbridge's sickly pink office, viewed as if through frosted glass. Wednesday sat rigidly in a chair, facing Umbridge across her desk. Neither spoke, locked in what appeared to be a battle of wills. Fudge's portrait watched nervously from the wall, while the decorative kittens in their plates seemed unusually still. Miss Adams, Umbridge finally broke the silence. Your continued obstruction of ministry educational initiatives cannot be tolerated. Tell me what you know about Potter's illegal organization. I don't attend group activities, Wednesday replied flatly. I find them inefficient. Yet you conveniently appeared just as we were apprehending Potter. Umbridge's voice grew sweeter, always a dangerous sign. One might almost think it was planned. One might think many things, Professor. Thought remains free, despite Educational Decree Number 26. Umbridge's face tightened with anger. Your attitude has been noted. Perhaps you need a reminder of the consequences of defying ministry authority. She opened her desk drawer and removed a familiar object, the blood quill she'd used in my detentions. I believe some lines are in order. I must not interfere with ministry business should suffice. Wednesday's expression didn't change, but I felt a subtle shift in the shadows connecting us, a ripple of something almost like amusement. How interesting, she said, taking the quill without hesitation. My family has a collection of historical torture devices. This one is quaint. Umbridge's smile faltered slightly at Wednesday's lack of fear. Begin writing, Miss Adams. Wednesday placed the quill to parchment and began to write. The words appeared on the back of her hand as expected, cutting into her flesh, but instead of red, the blood that welled up was dark, almost black. And rather than showing pain, Wednesday watched the process with detached interest. Fascinating, she murmured. The quill draws both blood and magic. Inefficient design, though. The Adams blood quill transfers the pain to the assigner, not the assignee. Umbridge shifted uncomfortably. Continue writing, Miss Adams. As Wednesday wrote line after line, something strange began to happen. The cuts on her hand healed between lines, but the words began appearing elsewhere, on the parchment itself, the desk surface, and most disturbingly, on the wall behind Umbridge, written in what looked like the same dark blood. Umbridge, focused on Wednesday's hand, hadn't noticed yet. But the words multiplied with each line, spreading across her office like a creeping stain. I must not interfere with ministry business. Through our shadow connection, I sensed Wednesday's intent, not resistance but redirection, turning the quill's magic back on itself. She caught my presence in the reflection, her dark eyes flicking briefly to the mirror, and I knew she was aware of my watching. A crash echoed from somewhere nearby, Neville's promised distraction. Umbridge's head jerked toward the door. What was that? She demanded, rising from her chair. Another crash, closer this time, followed by Peeves' cackling laughter and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Wait here, Umbridge ordered, hurrying to the door. Continue your lines. The moment she left, Wednesday stood and approached the mirror directly. Harry, she said quietly. You've mastered reflection speaking. Good. Are you all right? I asked, concerned about the blood quill's effects. Pain is just sensation. She glanced at her hand, which showed no marks despite dozens of lines written. Adam's blood doesn't respond to coercion as expected. I need to get you out of there. Unnecessary. Everything proceeds according to plan. She touched the mirror's surface from her side. This is actually fortuitous. Umbridge's attention is now firmly fixed on me, not you. Continue preparing for the equinox ritual, it's more important than ever. But, trust the shadows, Harry. Her voice remained calm, but I sensed urgency beneath it. What seems like disaster may be opportunity in disguise. The office door handle rattled, Umbridge returning. Wednesday stepped back from the mirror, resuming her seat just as Umbridge burst in, face flushed with anger. Peeves, she fumed. That poltergeist has gone too far this time. He's dragged all the suits of armor from the east corridor and arranged them in a most inappropriate tableau. She stopped abruptly, finally noticing the words that now covered her walls, desk, and even the backs of her kitten plates. The blood-written text pulsed slightly in the lamplight, seeming almost alive. What is this? She whispered, horror spreading across her face. You asked me to write lines, Professor, Wednesday replied mildly. I always strive for thoroughness in my assignments. The connection faded as Umbridge's scream of outrage shattered the calm of her office. The last thing I saw was Wednesday's composed face against a background of living, bleeding text that continued to spread like a sentient vine. I pulled back into my physical surroundings, heart racing but mind strangely calm. Whatever happened next, Wednesday could handle herself, perhaps better than anyone I'd ever known. Sure enough, by dinner time, rumors flew through the great hall. Professor Umbridge had been seen rushing to the hospital wing, reportedly suffering from mysterious cuts that appeared on her hands whenever she tried to issue new punishments. Her office remained locked, with strange sounds occasionally emanating from within. As for Wednesday, she arrived at dinner precisely on time, taking her usual seat at the Ravenclaw table as if nothing unusual had occurred. The only sign of her afternoon's experience was a slight darkening of her already black nail polish, which, I realized with a start, might actually be Umbridge's transformed blood quill ink. Later that evening, our shadow circle gathered in the room of requirement for what might be our last meeting before the equinox ritual. News of the DA's discovery had spread anxiety throughout the school, but in our small group, resolve had only strengthened. What happened with Umbridge was brilliant, Ron said admiringly to Wednesday. The whole blood quill turning against her, genius. Simple redirection, she replied. All magic leaves traces. Turn those traces back on the caster, and consequences follow naturally. But how did you make it spread like that? Hermione asked, both disturbed and intrigued. Blood shouldn't behave that way. Adam's blood doesn't follow conventional rules. Wednesday removed a small vial from her pocket, containing what looked like black ink. It remembers intention. The quill intended to cause pain as punishment, my blood simply ensured the punishment returned to its rightful recipient. Will it stop? Neville wondered. The spreading words, I mean. Eventually. When the lesson is sufficiently learned. Wednesday's expression remained impassive, but I caught the slightest gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. Now, we should focus on preparations for tomorrow night. The equinox ritual required specific contributions from each of us. Luna had collected moon water, dew gathered only during a full moon. Hermione reluctantly provided academic knowledge, researching astronomical alignments. Ron, surprisingly, offered strategic insights on positioning and timing. Neville prepared several rare plants with protective properties. Ginny crafted focusing crystals from materials Wednesday provided. As for me, I needed only to bring myself, and the night orchid that hadn't left my chest since I'd first placed it there. The ritual isn't dangerous, Wednesday assured everyone, sensing unspoken concerns. But it is powerful. Its purpose is clarification, separating tangled magical influences within Harry. Like Voldemort's connection versus the Adam's shadow bond? Hermione asked. Wednesday nodded. Precisely. Currently, these influences are intertwined, making it difficult for Harry to control which affects him at any moment. The equinox, when light and dark achieve perfect balance, provides an ideal opportunity to establish boundaries between them. And once they're separated? I asked. What then? Then you choose which to strengthen and which to diminish. Wednesday's dark eyes met mine. The shadow deception becomes possible only when you can fully distinguish between your mind and his. As our meeting concluded, Wednesday held me back while the others left in pairs, using our practiced shadow concealment techniques to avoid detection. There's something I haven't told the others, she said once we were alone. About tomorrow's ritual. What is it? There's a reason I needed Luna's perception specifically. Wednesday's voice took on a rare hesitancy. The ritual might reveal more than just magical influences. It could expose aspects of your parents' intentions when they sought the Adam's blessing. What do you mean? Blood pacts have specific parameters, conditions under which they activate, actions they compel. She studied my face carefully. My mother believes your parents included special provisions in their request, beyond simple protection. Like what? That's what we'll discover tomorrow. She reached out, her cool fingers briefly touching the spot where the night orchid lay hidden beneath my robes. The flower responds to you so strongly, it suggests the connection goes deeper than we initially thought. The gravity in her voice sent a shiver down my spine, not fear exactly, but anticipation of something momentous approaching. Whatever tomorrow's ritual revealed, it would change my understanding of not just the present danger, but my own past. I'll be ready, I promised. Wednesday nodded once. The shadows have been waiting for you a long time, Harry Potter. Tomorrow, they finally speak. The following day passed in a haze of tension. News had spread of the DA's discovery, though Dumbledore had somehow managed to take responsibility, fleeing before the Ministry could arrest him. Umbridge, now styled headmistress, implemented even stricter security measures, though her personal appearance had deteriorated notably, dark circles under her eyes, jumpiness at sudden movements, and long sleeves despite the warming weather, presumably hiding the spreading words Wednesday's blood had triggered. Classes proceeded under a cloud of apprehension. McGonagall looked grimmer than usual, Flitwick taught with uncharacteristic sobriety, and even Snape seemed disturbed by the changing atmosphere at Hogwarts. Only Wednesday maintained her usual composure, moving through the day's activities with the same measured grace she always displayed. During Transfiguration, she performed a complex conversion from inanimate to animate matter that left even McGonagall impressed, transforming a silver hairpin into a living nightingale that sang with uncanny sweetness before reverting to metal. Most interesting approach, Miss Adams, McGonagall commented. Not the standard method, but undeniably effective. My family believes form follows function, Professor, Wednesday replied. The object remembers what it wants to be. As darkness fell, I grew increasingly anxious about our planned ritual. The astronomy tower would be deserted after curfew, but reaching it undetected would be challenging with Umbridge's increased security. We'd arranged to travel separately using our shadow-walking techniques, meeting precisely at midnight. At 11:30, I slipped from Gryffindor Tower under my invisibility cloak, the Marauder's map guiding me past patrolling Inquisitorial Squad members. When I reached the base of the astronomy tower, I folded the cloak into my pocket and focused on the shadows Wednesday had taught me to perceive. They responded immediately, almost eagerly, wrapping around me like a second invisibility cloak as I ascended the spiral staircase. The night orchid against my chest pulsed with each step, as if anticipating what lay ahead. The tower platform stood empty under a clear sky, stars unusually bright for early spring. I checked the map again, confirming no one approached, then sent a small shadow signal as Wednesday had taught us, a brief darkening of the nearest torch that would be visible only to those attuned to shadow magic. One by one, they arrived, Luna first, carrying a silver bowl of moon water, then Neville with a cloth bundle of protective plants, Hermione clutching several sheets of astronomical calculations, Ron with a small compass-like device Wednesday had given him, and finally Ginny, carefully transporting the focusing crystals. Wednesday herself arrived last, precisely as the tower clock began to strike midnight. She wore not her Hogwarts robes but what appeared to be family ceremonial attire, a long black dress with intricate silver embroidery depicting phases of the moon, constellations, and what looked like stylized tombstones. The equinox apex approaches, she said without preamble. We have 17 minutes to prepare. With practiced efficiency, our group arranged the ritual components according to Wednesday's instructions. Neville placed his plants at specific cardinal points, their leaves trembling slightly despite the still air. Hermione laid out her calculations, which Wednesday reviewed with a nod of approval. Ron used his device to mark precise positions for each participant. Ginny arranged the crystals in a pattern that somehow reflected the stars overhead. Luna poured her moon water into a shallow silver basin at the center of our circle, where it caught starlight and seemed to amplify it, casting prismatic reflections across the stone floor. And now, Wednesday said, turning to me, the focal point. I stepped forward, oddly calm despite the ceremonial atmosphere. Following Wednesday's earlier instructions, I removed the night orchid from around my neck and placed it gently on the surface of the moon water, where it floated without getting wet. Everyone to your positions, Wednesday directed. Remember, maintain focus but don't interfere, regardless of what you see or hear. The shadows speak their own language tonight. We formed a circle around the basin, Luna directly across from me, Hermione to my right, Ron to my left, Neville and Ginny at the remaining positions. Wednesday stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the cool emanation that always surrounded her. The equinox marks perfect balance between light and dark, she began, her voice taking on a ceremonial cadence I'd never heard before. Today, we stand at the threshold between seasons, between realms, between influences. We seek clarity for Harry Potter, bearer of multiple magical legacies. We seek separation of that which has become entangled. She drew a small silver knife from her sleeve, similar to the one her mother had used in my dream memory of the original blessing. Blood recognized blood in the original pact, she continued. Blood will recognize blood again tonight. She made a small cut across her palm, allowing several drops of her dark blood to fall into the moon water around the floating orchid. The water remained clear, but the drops descended like tiny black pearls to the bottom of the basin. Adam's shadow, recognize your kin, Wednesday intoned. Find your echo in the Potter line. She turned to me, offering the knife handle first. Your blood now, Harry. 3 drops only. Taking the knife, I made a small cut on my palm, allowing exactly 3 drops to fall beside Wednesday's. Unlike hers, my blood dispersed into the water in crimson tendrils that seemed to reach toward the black pearls of her blood. The moment they connected, the night orchid began to pulse with visible energy, and the moon water started to glow with a silvery light that grew steadily brighter. Blood to blood, shadow to shadow, Wednesday continued, taking my cut hand in her own so our wounds pressed together. By equinox light we seek the truth of bonds formed and promises made. A strange sensation spread from our joined hands, not pain, but an intense awareness, as if every nerve ending had awakened simultaneously. The night orchid in the basin spun slowly, its petals opening wider than should have been physically possible. Harry Potter stands at the crossroads of 3 magical lineages, Wednesday's voice grew stronger, resonating across the tower. Potter born, Adams blessed, riddle marked. Tonight we separate what has been tangled, divide what has been confused, clarify what has been obscured. The moon water began to move, swirling around the orchid in a spiral pattern. As it accelerated, 3 distinct colors emerged within the liquid, a warm gold, a deep black, and an acid green that made my scar prickle uncomfortably. Show us the Potter legacy, Wednesday commanded. The golden threads brightened, rising from the water to form a hovering image, a stag and doe standing protectively side by side. I caught my breath, recognizing my parents' Patronus forms. Show us the Adam's blessing. The black threads followed, intertwining with the gold to create a complex network that surrounded the animal forms like a protective web. Where they intersected, small points of silvery light appeared, like stars in a night sky. Show us the riddle intrusion. The green threads moved last, attempting to penetrate the gold and black network. In some places they succeeded, creating discordant patterns that disrupted the harmony of the other colors. One particularly bright green tendril connected directly to my forehead, making my scar burn. The 3 influences revealed, Wednesday said softly. Now we understand their boundaries. Luna spoke for the first time, her dreamy voice suddenly focused. The green seeks dominance, but doesn't understand the black. It pushes where it should pull, attacks where it should observe. Yes, Wednesday agreed. Voldemort's soul fragment recognizes the Potter blood but remains blind to the Adam's shadows. This is our advantage. The swirling colors continued their dance above the basin, occasionally shifting as if responding to our observations. I stared transfixed, seeing the magical influences within me externalized for the first time. There's more, Luna said suddenly, her eyes widening as she gazed at the pattern. Look at how the gold and black threads bind together at specific points. That's not just protection, it's preparation. Wednesday nodded slowly. The original blessing contained additional provisions. Show us, shadows. Reveal the full intent of the blood pact. The pattern shifted again, the gold and black threads forming what looked like words in a language I couldn't read, ancient symbols that glowed with inner light. What does it say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's Adam's family script, Wednesday replied, studying the symbols intently. A specific clause my mother added at your parents' request. Her eyes widened slightly, the most surprise I'd ever seen her display. Interesting. What? I pressed. The blessing wasn't just protective, it was preparatory. She looked from the symbols to me. Your parents asked that if they couldn't teach you themselves, the Adam's shadows would preserve certain capabilities within you. Talents that might otherwise have been lost or suppressed. What talents? Wandless magic. Affinity for shadow realms. Instinctive defensive capabilities. Wednesday's voice held a note of respect. Your mother specifically requested these provisions, she foresaw you might need abilities beyond conventional wizarding training. The revelation struck me deeply. My mother had not only sought to protect me but to ensure I would have access to magical traditions beyond what Hogwarts taught, including the very shadow magic Wednesday had been teaching me. There's more, Luna said, staring at the pattern as it continued to shift. The binding goes both ways. The Addams family isn't just obligated to protect Harry, they're also bound to, oh. To what? Hermione asked, breaking her silence. To restore what was taken, Luna finished, looking at Wednesday for confirmation. Not just Harry's safety, but his heritage. Both heritages. Wednesday nodded slowly. The full weight of the Potter legacy, magical, familial, and ancestral, was to be preserved through the Addams connection if his parents couldn't fulfill that role. I stared at the swirling patterns, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. This wasn't just about protection from Voldemort or managing our connection. My parents had tried to ensure I would know my heritage, understand my legacy, even if they couldn't teach me themselves. They knew, I whispered. They suspected they might not survive. They hoped for the best but prepared for the worst, Wednesday confirmed gently. True Addams thinking. The green thread suddenly pulsed stronger, the tendril connected to my scar flaring painfully. I gasped, gripping Wednesday's hand tighter as a foreign rage flooded through me, Voldemort, sensing something happening though not understanding what. He feels it, I managed through gritted teeth. He knows something's changing. Wednesday's response was immediate. Now, while the boundaries are visible. Separate what was joined, divide what was confused. She placed her free hand directly on my scar, her touch cool against the burning pain. Addams shadows, reclaim your territory. Potter gold, strengthen your walls. Riddle green, return to your boundaries. The pain intensified momentarily, then began to recede as the colored patterns above the basin reorganized themselves. The green threads withdrew from many of their intrusions, contained by the combined strength of the gold and black. Choose, Harry, Wednesday instructed urgently. Which influence do you strengthen? Which do you diminish? The answer came without hesitation. Strengthen Potter and Addams. Contain Riddle. As I spoke, the gold and black threads brightened, weaving together in a more deliberate pattern while the green retreated further, though the connection to my scar remained. That cannot be severed yet, Wednesday observed. But it can be controlled. The moon water in the basin began to settle, the night orchid slowly closing its petals as the magical energy subsided. Above us, the stars seemed to pulse in response, and I felt a profound shift within myself, as if fragments of my being that had been misaligned suddenly clicked into their proper places. Wednesday released my hand, and the cut on my palm healed instantly, leaving a faint silvery mark like a crescent moon. It is done, she said softly. The equinox has witnessed the clarification. The shadows have spoken. We stood in silence for a moment, the magnitude of what we'd witnessed settling over us. Then Luna smiled, her dreamy demeanor returning. Your aura looks much better now, Harry, she announced cheerfully. The Raxperts can't get through at all. The tension broke, and even Wednesday's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. How do you feel? Hermione asked me anxiously. I considered the question, taking inventory of my mind and body. The constant background pressure I'd lived with for months, Voldemort's emotions bleeding into mine, the confused tangle of magical influences, had resolved into distinct channels I could sense individually. Clearer, I said finally. Like. I can tell which thoughts are mine and which aren't. And there's something else. I held out my hand, focusing on the shadow it cast in the starlight. To everyone's astonishment, the shadow rose from the floor, shaping itself into a small bird that flew a circle around our group before settling back into its normal form. Wandless shadow manipulation, Wednesday noted with approval. The Potter-Adams connection is fully awakened. Wicked, Ron breathed. We should go, Neville said, glancing nervously at his watch. It's almost 1, the patrols will be changing soon. We quickly gathered the ritual components, erasing all evidence of our presence. As the others prepared to leave in separate directions, Wednesday held me back once more. The shadow deception can begin now, she said once we were alone. You can direct what Voldemort sees through your connection. The false trail to the Department of Mysteries? She nodded. Show him what we want him to see, your increasing obsession with the door, your frustration at being kept in the dark, your determination to discover what lies beyond it. And the trap? What exactly are we leading him into? Not yet. Wednesday glanced at the sky, where the stars were beginning to fade as clouds moved in. There are preparations still to make, allies to position. But now we have a crucial advantage, you control the connection, not him. She reached out, retrieving the night orchid from the basin and returning it to me. Keep this with you always. It helps maintain the separation we established tonight. I slipped it back around my neck, feeling it settle against my skin with a sense of rightness. Thank you, Wednesday. For everything. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with those fathomless dark eyes. The Addams family always honors its obligations, Harry Potter. Especially the ones written in blood. As we parted ways at the base of the tower, each taking different shadow paths back to our dormitories, I felt a strange combination of clarity and anticipation. For the first time since Voldemort's return, I wasn't simply reacting to events or following others' instructions. I had agency, understanding, and abilities uniquely suited to the challenge ahead. Whatever came next, I would face it not just as Harry Potter, boy who lived, but as the heir to multiple magical legacies, each offering different strengths for the battles to come. And with Wednesday Addams as my unexpected ally, even the darkest shadows no longer seemed frightening, because now, they were mine to command as well. Chapter 3, Blood and Protection. April arrived with deceptive gentleness. The grounds burst into bloom, students shed their winter cloaks, and if you ignored Umbridge's increasingly tyrannical rule, Hogwarts almost felt normal. I knew better. Every night, I practiced the shadow deception Wednesday had taught me, carefully constructing false trails in my mind for Voldemort to follow. I showed him my frustration at being kept in the dark, my growing obsession with the Department of Mysteries door, my determination to discover what lay beyond it. All calculated, all controlled. He's watching, Wednesday confirmed during one of our private sessions in the room of requirement. The green threads pull stronger whenever you focus on the corridor. Is he buying it? Yes. But he's cautious. We need to intensify the deception. She paced the room, which had configured itself as a Victorian study with strange artifacts lining the walls. The timing must be precise. Since the equinox ritual, our connection had deepened. Not romance exactly, but something equally powerful, a magical kinship anchored in blood and shadow. I felt it every time we worked together, this resonance between our cores that made complex shadow magic feel natural. Wednesday, I said, interrupting her thoughts. There's something I don't understand. Why did the Potters and Addamses form a blood pact in the first place? What connected our families before my parents came to yours? She paused, considering how much to reveal. The original connection dates back centuries. Your ancestor, Hardwin Potter, married my ancestor, Iphigenia Adams, in 1718. They discovered a magical compatibility between our lineages, Potter light and Adam's shadow, creating a balance neither could achieve alone. What kind of balance? Protection against magical corruption. Wednesday pulled an ancient-looking book from her ever-present satchel. The Potters have always been drawn to justice magic, spells that defend, shield, restore. The Adamses practice boundary magic, the spaces between life and death, light and dark, being and non-being. And together? Together, they created safeguards against the darkest form of magical corruption, soul fracturing. She opened the book to a marked page, revealing illustrations of what I recognized as Horcruxes. Your ancestors and mine worked together to contain an outbreak of soul magic in the 1700s. Their combined bloodlines created specific defenses. I stared at the illustrations, thinking of Voldemort's fractured soul. That's why my parents sought your family's help. Precisely. Wednesday's dark eyes met mine. They suspected Voldemort had created Horcruxes. The prophecy suggested you would face him. They activated the ancient blood alliance to give you the tools you'd need. The shadow magic. Among other things. Wednesday closed the book. There's more you need to know, but not here. Not now. The castle has ears. Umbridge. And others. She glanced toward the door. The inquisitorial squad has been following me. Malfoy in particular seems determined to discover what we're planning. Let him try, I said with newfound confidence. Since the equinox ritual, I'd felt more centered, more in control of my own magic. The night orchid never left my chest, its presence a constant reminder of the clarity I'd gained. Wednesday almost smiled, that tiny movement of lips that signaled genuine amusement. He already has. 3 times this week. The results were educational for him. I didn't ask for details. Since becoming headmistress, Umbridge had given the inquisitorial squad nearly unlimited power to harass students, but those who targeted Wednesday invariably suffered mysterious misfortunes. Pansy Parkinson still couldn't speak above a whisper after attempting to confiscate Wednesday's journal. Crabbe had developed an uncontrollable fear of his own reflection after trying to follow her to our Shadow Circle meeting. We need to accelerate our timeline, Wednesday continued. Umbridge grows desperate. She knows she's losing control of the school despite her position. What about the trap we're setting for Voldemort? Nearly ready. She checked her watch, an unusual piece with multiple hands that seemed to track something other than time. We need to meet the others. Tonight we prepare the final phase. The room of requirement transformed itself into something new that evening, a circular chamber with walls that seemed to shift between solid stone and insubstantial shadow. Our shadow circle had grown adept at entering the castle undetected, using the techniques Wednesday had taught us to slip past the inquisitorial squad's patrols. Everyone's here, Hermione reported as Ron arrived last, slightly breathless from a near miss with Filch. Good. Wednesday moved to the center of the room where a table had appeared, covered with what looked like architectural plans. These are the Department of Mysteries blueprints. Memorize them. Luna leaned forward, studying the revolving central room and its multiple doorways. The symmetry is beautiful. Designed to confuse those who don't understand circular thinking. Exactly. Wednesday traced a route through the maze-like complex. The Hall of Prophecies contains what Voldemort seeks, the record of the prediction that connected him to Harry. The Death Chamber contains what we need to protect, the archway connecting to the Shadow Realm. That's where we'll set the trap. Neville asked, his confidence growing with each meeting. Yes. Using Harry's connection to lure Voldemort's followers while protecting the actual targets. Wednesday looked at each of us in turn. I won't lie. This will be dangerous. Death Eaters won't hesitate to kill students. We know the risks, Ginny said firmly. We're not backing out now. I studied my friend's determined faces, feeling a surge of gratitude and concern. You don't have to do this. It's my fight. No, it's not, Ron countered immediately. It hasn't been just your fight since the DA started. Since Cedric, Hermione added quietly. Wednesday nodded, a rare gesture of approval. Good. Clarity of purpose strengthens shadow magic. She pulled several small objects from her bag, what looked like carved black stone discs. These are Adam's shadow anchors. They create safe passage through darkness. Each of you take one. She distributed the discs, which felt surprisingly warm against my palm. If separated during conflict, activate your anchor by pressing it to your shadow. It will connect you to the others, allowing communication and, if necessary, extraction. Extraction to where? Hermione questioned, examining her disc with academic interest. To the nearest shadow ally. Wednesday glanced at me. Harry's connection to the Adam's shadows means he functions as the primary anchor point. In danger, the discs will pull you toward him, regardless of physical barriers. Wicked, Ron breathed, slipping the disc into his pocket. Now for the strategy. Wednesday unrolled a second set of plans. The Department of Mysteries changes its configuration regularly, but certain rooms remain constant. We'll establish shadow markers at these fixed points, creating a network we can navigate regardless of how the rooms rearrange themselves. For the next hour, she drilled us on the department's layout, escape routes, and contingency plans. The level of detail suggested Wednesday had been planning this for months, perhaps since before she'd even arrived at Hogwarts. One crucial point, she said as we concluded. The veil in the death chamber. Under no circumstances should anyone touch it or pass through it. It's a one-way threshold to the shadow realm, fatal to anyone not carrying Adam's blood. Even with these, Ginny held up her shadow anchor. The anchors allow shadow walking, not realm crossing. Wednesday's expression grew even more serious than usual. The veil has been unstable since Voldemort's resurrection. His fractured soul creates disturbances in the boundary between worlds. Is that why he wants the prophecy? I asked. To understand how to fix his soul? No. He wants the prophecy because he fears what he doesn't know. Wednesday's dark eyes met mine. But in luring him or his followers to the department, we risk exposing the veil to his influence. That's what we must prevent at all costs. As the meeting ended, Wednesday asked me to stay behind. Once the others had left, she retrieved something from a shadowy corner, a long, narrow package wrapped in what looked like funeral shrouds. This belonged to your godfather's brother, she said, handing it to me. Regulus Black. I unwrapped the package carefully, revealing an unusual wand, jet black with silver inlay forming intricate patterns along its length. How did you get this? Family connections. The Blacks and Adamses have historical ties. Wednesday watched as I examined the wand. It contains a shadow core, rare and particularly responsive to the kind of magic you've been learning. I held the wand cautiously. It felt different from my phoenix feather wand, cooler, with a subtle vibration that resonated with the night orchid against my chest. Why give me this? Your current wand shares a core with Voldemort's. In direct confrontation, that connection can be exploited. She nodded toward Regulus's wand. This offers an alternative, one he won't anticipate. I gave it an experimental wave. A stream of silver-black sparks erupted from the tip, swirling into temporary shapes that resembled running stags before dissolving. It recognizes you, Wednesday noted with satisfaction. The Black and Potter bloodlines also share connections. Sirius isn't your only link to that family. I can't replace my wand, I said, though I was intrigued by how natural the black wand felt in my hand. Not replace. Supplement. Wednesday took the wand, demonstrating a quick wrist movement that made it vanish up her sleeve. Shadow magic allows you to carry multiple focuses and switch between them instantaneously. Another advantage Voldemort won't expect. She taught me the concealment technique, and soon I could transition between wands with a mere thought, phoenix feather for conventional magic, shadow core for the techniques Wednesday had been teaching me. "There's something else," I said as we prepared to leave. "Something you're not telling me about why your family is so invested in this fight." Wednesday paused, her expression unreadable in the dimming light as the room prepared to reset itself. "The Addams family has opposed soul fracturing for generations. It's not just about honoring the blood pact with your parents." "Then what?" "Balance." She spoke the word with unusual reverence. "Death should be respected, not cheated. Boundaries between worlds should be maintained, not violated. Voldemort threatens the very equilibrium my family has guarded for centuries. Between life and death. Between all opposing forces." Wednesday's voice took on a quality I'd rarely heard, something almost like passion. "The Addamses understand darkness, Harry. We live within it, draw power from it, celebrate it, but we never corrupt it. What Voldemort has done with his Horcruxes is corruption in its purest form." I considered this new perspective. The Addamses weren't fighting against dark magic, they were fighting for its proper place within a balanced magical ecosystem. It was a distinction I'd never considered before, challenging everything I'd been taught about dark versus light magic. "So when this is over?" I asked. "What then?" Something flickered in Wednesday's dark eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or a question she herself hadn't resolved. "First we survive what's coming. Then we decide what follows." May brought OWLs and escalating tension throughout Hogwarts. Umbridge's control grew increasingly desperate as strange occurrences multiplied around the castle. Suits of armor whispered warnings to DA members when Inquisitorial Squad members approached. Peeves, seemingly inspired by the general atmosphere of rebellion, reached new heights of destructive creativity. The enchanted swamp Fred and George had left upon their dramatic departure continued to expand despite Umbridge's best efforts to remove it. Through it all, our shadow circle continued meeting in absolute secrecy, protected by Wednesday's increasingly sophisticated concealment techniques. The regular DA remained disbanded after Dumbledore's departure, but key members received training through our smaller group, creating a network of prepared allies throughout the school. My nightly sessions of controlled dreaming continued, carefully feeding Voldemort's curiosity about the Department of Mysteries while protecting my true knowledge of what waited there. The connection had become a channel I could direct rather than an invasion I suffered, one of many changes since the equinox ritual. Other changes proved more visible to those around me. My spellcasting grew more precise, requiring less effort for greater effect. I moved differently, more fluidly, more aware of my surroundings. Several professors commented on my improved performance, though only McGonagall seemed to suspect the true cause, watching Wednesday with thoughtful calculation whenever we were in transfiguration together. "You're changing," Hermione observed one evening in the common room, keeping her voice low. "Since that ritual, you're different." "Better different or worse different?" I asked, though I already knew my own answer. "Just different." She studied me with academic intensity. "More confident. More focused. Sometimes when you move quickly, your shadow seems to lag behind for a split second." I hadn't noticed that particular effect, though I discovered I could partially separate from my shadow when concentrating. "The ritual clarified things," I explained, not quite answering her implied question. "Wednesday said it separated the magical influences within you. Potter, Addams, and him." Hermione hesitated. "Harry, are you sure we can trust what she's teaching us? Some of these techniques feel like they're just on the edge of dark magic." "They're not dark," I said with certainty. "Different, yes. Powerful, absolutely. But not dark in the way you mean. How can you be so sure?" I touched the night orchid beneath my robes, feeling its reassuring pulse. "Because dark magic corrupts. It takes more than it gives. This feels like claiming something that was always mine but that I never knew how to reach. Hermione didn't look entirely convinced, but her expression softened. Just be careful. We've seen what happens when wizards dabble in magic they don't fully understand. That's just it, I do understand it. Better than anything I've learned at Hogwarts. I leaned closer, lowering my voice further. Hermione, my parents arranged this. They wanted me to have these abilities, this knowledge. It was their last gift. That, finally, seemed to reach her. Hermione's resistance to Wednesday's methods had never stemmed from fear but from her deep respect for magical tradition and authority. The revelation that my parents had deliberately connected me to Adam's magic gave it a legitimacy she couldn't easily dismiss. All right, she conceded. But promise you'll tell me if something feels wrong. If the balance shifts too far. I promised, though I was increasingly certain that the balance Wednesday had helped me find was exactly what I'd needed all along. The catalyst came, as Wednesday had predicted it would, during our OWL examinations. History of Magic, my last written exam, and one I'd barely studied for given everything else occupying my mind. Halfway through answering a question about giant wars, my carefully constructed mental partitions wavered from exhaustion. The vision struck with perfect clarity: Sirius, captured and tortured by Voldemort in the Department of Mysteries. Unlike my previous nightmares, this felt viscerally real: Sirius's pain, Voldemort's cold amusement, the familiar corridor and the door I'd seen so many times finally opening to reveal the Hall of Prophecies. I fell from my chair, drawing startled exclamations from the other students and concern from the examination proctor. They helped me to my feet, asked if I needed the hospital wing. I waved them off, saying I just needed air, and stumbled from the great hall as soon as they allowed it. In the entrance hall, I leaned against a wall, heart racing, trying to sort genuine vision from shadow deception. We'd anticipated something like this, Voldemort attempting to use my connection to Sirius to lure me to the department, but the vividness caught me off guard. Even knowing it might be false, the image of Sirius in pain clawed at me. Harry. Wednesday materialized beside me, her transfiguration OWL apparently concluded. One look at my face told her everything. He showed you Sirius, she stated rather than asked. I nodded, still catching my breath. In the Department of Mysteries. Being tortured. It's begun then. Earlier than we expected. She glanced around the entrance hall, which remained empty with most students still in examinations. We need to verify whether Sirius is actually missing before proceeding. How? Umbridge watches all communications. Not all. Wednesday led me quickly up the marble staircase. The Adam's shadow network remains beyond her awareness. We need the star chamber. We made our way to the hidden room Wednesday had shown me before, taking indirect routes and using shadow concealment when necessary. Once inside the circular chamber with its painted constellations, Wednesday immediately began preparations, sprinkling dark powder over the astral pool at the center. We'll contact my mother first. She can dispatch Thing to Grimmauld Place to verify Sirius's location. She worked quickly, her hands moving in practiced motions over the indigo liquid. Then we signal the others. The shadow anchors will alert them. If it is a trap? I asked, still fighting the visceral panic the vision had triggered. Then we turn it to our advantage. Wednesday's dark eyes gleamed with determination. Everything is in place. The shadow markers are set. The liquid in the astral pool began to swirl, points of light rearranging themselves into a familiar face, Morticia Adams, looking even more elegant than in our previous communication. Wednesday, darling. And Harry Potter. Her red-painted lips curved into a smile. I sense urgency in your call. Mother, Wednesday acknowledged. Voldemort has made his move. Harry received a vision of Sirius Black being tortured in the Department of Mysteries. Ah, the trap springs. Morticia nodded thoughtfully. As it happens, I dispatched Thing to Grimmauld Place just this morning. A premonition suggested he might be needed. And Sirius? I asked anxiously. Was present and perfectly safe as of 3 hours ago. Morticia's expression grew more serious. However, I've sensed increasing disturbances in the shadow realm throughout the day. Voldemort is manipulating multiple pieces simultaneously. What kind of disturbances? Wednesday questioned. Boundary fluctuations near the ministry. The veil grows restless. Morticia raised a hand, silencing a willowy plant beside her that had begun to keen softly. You must proceed with caution, children. If Voldemort's followers breached the death chamber, they could damage the veil beyond repair. We're ready, Wednesday assured her. The shadow anchors are distributed, the markers placed. Good. I've alerted your father. He's contacting certain allies who may prove useful. Morticia's image began to flicker. The stars shift. I must go. Remember, Wednesday, family first. Always, Wednesday replied as her mother's image faded into the indigo liquid. What did she mean, family first? I asked as Wednesday began another set of preparations over the pool. Adam's family code. It means protect the bloodline, both ours and those connected to us by oath. She gave me a significant look. That includes you, Harry. Before I could respond, the pool illuminated again, this time connecting to what appeared to be Grimmauld Place's kitchen. Sirius's face appeared, looking surprised but pleased. Harry. And Miss Adams. Wasn't expecting a call through this old thing. Morticia said it might activate, though. Relief flooded through me at seeing him alive and unharmed. Sirius, thank Merlin. You're all right. Course I am. Bit stir-crazy cooped up here, but all right. His expression grew concerned. Why? What's happened? I quickly explained the vision, watching understanding dawn on his face. A trap, then, he said grimly. Trying to lure you to the Department of Mysteries. Yes, but one we've been anticipating, Wednesday interjected. We've prepared accordingly. Sirius's expression shifted, looking at Wednesday with new respect. Morticia mentioned you'd taken up the family mantle properly. Said you were flourishing in protective duty. The blood oath demands nothing less. Wait, I interrupted. You know about the Adams blood oath? You never said. It wasn't my place to explain, Harry, Sirius said apologetically. James made me swear not to mention it unless absolutely necessary. The connection between your families works best when discovered naturally, not forced. Which it has been, Wednesday confirmed. The equinox ritual completed the awakening process. Sirius's eyebrows rose. You performed the equinox ritual? Already? That's impressive. James thought Harry might not be ready for that until much later. Circumstances accelerated the timeline. Wednesday checked her unusual watch again. We need to move quickly. Voldemort believes his deception worked. He'll expect Harry to rush to the ministry immediately. I'll alert the order, Sirius said, suddenly all business. But Harry, promise me you won't go charging off alone. Wait for backup. That's exactly what we've planned, I assured him, though backup meant something different than what he assumed. We're not walking into this unprepared. Good lad. Sirius looked relieved but still concerned. And Miss Adams? Take care of my godson. The Adams-Potter alliance has always been formidable, but you too. He trailed off, studying us with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Well, Morticia wasn't exaggerating about the strength of the bond. Family first, Mr. Black, Wednesday replied solemnly. After the connection closed, I turned to Wednesday. What did he mean about us? The blood oath strengthens with each generation. Your parents renewed an old alliance. We've. She hesitated, searching for the right words. Evolved it. Into what? Something new. The shadow anchors respond more strongly to our combined magic than they should theoretically. She began gathering her materials, movements precise and efficient. We need to alert the others, then create a convincing trail for the inquisitorial squad to follow. Umbridge must believe we're attempting to contact Sirius directly. The abrupt change of subject wasn't lost on me, but I recognized the urgency of our situation. Whatever this evolved connection between us meant, it would have to wait. I'll try to use her fire again, I suggested. Make it obvious. While you gather the others. Wednesday nodded approval. Good. She'll be watching for exactly that kind of desperate action. She handed me one of the shadow anchors. Activate this once you've been caught. I'll extract you when everyone's in position. The plan worked perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. With Ron's help creating a diversion about Peeves in the Transfiguration department, I broke into Umbridge's office and attempted to contact Sirius through her fire. As expected, she caught me in the act, dragging Hermione in as well after finding us together. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly the situation would escalate. Umbridge, clearly at the end of her rope, threatened to use the Cruciatus curse to force information from me. Hermione, thinking quickly, fed her a story about Dumbledore's supposed secret weapon in the Forbidden Forest. As Umbridge marched us at one point into the forest, I felt the shadow anchor in my pocket grow warm, Wednesday signaling that the others were in position. I needed to stall just a bit longer. Hermione led us deeper into the forest, improvising brilliantly until we encountered exactly what I'd hoped for, the centaurs, who had no love for ministry officials, especially those like Umbridge who'd been implementing anti-half-breed legislation. The confrontation unfolded rapidly. Umbridge's bigotry emerged in full force, she foolishly attacked a centaur, and they dragged her away into the depths of the forest, her screams fading into the distance. That, I said with genuine admiration, was brilliant, Hermione. She looked shaken but pleased. I wasn't sure they'd react that way, but she's been so horrible to them with all those restrictions. I pulled out my shadow anchor, which now pulsed with gentle light. Time to meet the others. Harry, wait. Hermione grabbed my arm. Are we really going to the Department of Mysteries? Even knowing it's a trap? Yes, but not the way Voldemort expects. I pressed the anchor to my shadow, which darkened and expanded around us. We're not rushing in blindly. We're finishing what my parents started. The anchor activated with a sensation like stepping through a cold waterfall. The forest dissolved around us, replaced by momentary darkness, then reformed into a different setting entirely, the room of requirement, where the rest of our shadow circle waited. Excellent timing, Wednesday greeted us. The order has been alerted. They'll be moving into position at the ministry, but we need to arrive first to set the final pieces. Ron, Neville, Ginny, and Luna stood ready, each holding their shadow anchor. All looked determined, though Neville's face showed a mix of fear and resolve that I found particularly courageous. How do we get to London? Hermione asked, recovering quickly from the disorienting shadow transport. We can't apparate from Hogwarts. The Thestrals, Luna suggested dreamily. They're quite fast, and very clever about finding places. No need. Wednesday moved to the center of the room, where a large circular pattern had been drawn on the floor. The shadow network is stronger than conventional magical transportation barriers. We'll travel directly. Through shadows. Ron looked skeptical. All the way to London. Distance is irrelevant in shadow spaces. Wednesday positioned us around the circle. The anchors connect to markers we've already placed in the Ministry atrium. We'll emerge there, then proceed to the Department of Mysteries using conventional methods, at least until we're spotted. And after we're spotted? Neville asked. Then we separate according to plan, drawing them through the department in specific patterns. Wednesday's eyes gleamed with rare intensity. Never forget, this isn't just about surviving their trap. It's about springing our own. She instructed us to stand in specific positions around the circle, our shadow anchors held before us. At the center, Wednesday placed a small object that resembled a sundial made of black glass. Shadow magic responds to intent and connection, she explained, her voice taking on the ceremonial cadence I'd come to associate with Adam's family magic. Focus on your anchor. Visualize the connection to me, to Harry, to each other. We travel as one unit, emerging at the first marker. I closed my eyes, concentrating on the anchor's gentle pulse against my palm. The room seemed to dim around us, shadows stretching and deepening until they enveloped us completely. The sensation of shadow travel across such distance proved more intense than our practice runs within Hogwarts. A rushing coldness surrounded us, not unpleasant but distinctly otherworldly. I felt the others' presences like bright points within the darkness, Wednesday's the strongest, a beacon guiding our movement. Then, abruptly, solid ground materialized beneath our feet. I opened my eyes to find us standing in the deserted ministry atrium, the evening silence broken only by the gentle splash of the fountain. It worked. Ginny whispered, looking around in amazement. Of course it worked, Wednesday replied matter-of-factly. Shadow magic predates the ministry's transportation barriers by several centuries. We moved quickly toward the lifts, our footsteps unnaturally quiet thanks to another of Wednesday's techniques. The ministry after hours felt eerie, empty hallways that should have bustled with activity, abandoned desks with quills still poised over parchment, magical memos frozen in mid-flight. Where is everyone? Ron whispered as we entered a lift. Home for the day, I replied, though something felt off about the emptiness. It's after hours. No, Wednesday said quietly as the lift descended. Something's wrong. There should be security wizards patrolling, even after hours. Her observation sent a chill through me. If the security wizards were missing, it could mean only one thing: Voldemort's followers had already arrived. Change of plan, I said as the lift reached level 9. They're already here, which means they know we're coming. Good. Wednesday's expression remained calm, but I detected an undercurrent of anticipation. The trap works in either direction. The Department of Mysteries corridor stretched before us exactly as I'd seen it in my dreams, black-tiled floor, bare walls, plain black door at the end. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding despite our preparation. This was no longer just vision or deception, we were really here, about to face what waited beyond. Remember, Wednesday murmured as I reached for the handle, once inside, the room will rotate. Use your shadow anchors to locate the markers. Don't be separated unless necessary. I nodded, drew both wands, my familiar phoenix feather visible in my right hand, Regulus Black's shadow wand concealed along my left arm, and opened the door. The circular room beyond matched my dreams perfectly, identical black doors at regular intervals, blue-flamed candles casting eerie light, the sensation of standing inside a dark carousel as the wall began to rotate immediately after we entered. Now, Wednesday commanded once the spinning stopped. We each pressed our anchors to the floor, activating the shadow markers she'd placed weeks earlier through methods she hadn't fully explained. Instantly, faint trails of darkness appeared, connecting our position to specific doors. Hall of Prophecies, I whispered, and one trail brightened. We followed it to the corresponding door, passing into a vast, cathedral-like space filled with towering shelves holding countless small glass orbs. Each shelf stretched into darkness overhead, creating the impression of standing in an endless library of glowing spheres. Row 97, I said, remembering my vision. That's where Sirius was supposed to be. That's where they'll expect us. Wednesday nodded. Proceed as if searching for him. Loudly. They need to believe the deception worked. We moved through the towering shelves, deliberately making more noise than necessary, calling Sirius's name at intervals. I felt watched, the sensation of hostile eyes following our progress. Harry, Hermione whispered urgently, these are all prophecies. I glanced at the nearest shelf, noting the yellowed labels beneath each sphere. Names, dates, cryptic designations, thousands of prophecies stored for generations. There, Ron pointed ahead. Row 97. We approached cautiously, wands ready. The aisle appeared empty, no Sirius, no Death Eaters, just endless shelves of prophecy records. But one orb caught my attention immediately, its label bearing my name, SPT to APWBD Dark Lord and Harry Potter. That's it, I breathed. The prophecy Voldemort wants. Harry, I don't think you should touch it, Hermione warned. He needs to, Wednesday countered. It's part of the plan. I reached for the glowing sphere, feeling its surprising warmth as my fingers closed around it. Nothing dramatic happened, no alarm, no sudden appearance of enemies, but the air itself seemed to grow heavier with tension. Very good, Potter. Now turn around, nice and slowly, and give that to me. The voice belonged to Lucius Malfoy, emerging from shadows at the end of the row. Black-robed figures materialized around us, Death Eaters, their faces hidden behind silver masks, wands trained on our group. Where's Sirius? I demanded, playing my part despite knowing the truth. Malfoy laughed, joined by several others, including a woman whose cackle sent chills down my spine. Bellatrix Lestrange. The Dark Lord always knows, she crowed, her heavy-lidded eyes gleaming with fanatical devotion. Always. Hand over the prophecy, Potter. I want to know where Sirius is. I insisted, maintaining the facade of someone who still believed the false vision. The little baby woke up frightened and thought what it dreamed was too, Bellatrix mocked in a horrible baby voice. The Dark Lord knew you would come. Knew you would be foolish enough to race to save your precious godfather. I tightened my grip on the prophecy, feeling Wednesday's shift almost imperceptibly beside me. Our shadow anchors thrummed with subtle energy, connecting us despite the feet of space between us. Everything progressed exactly as we'd planned, the Death Eaters revealing themselves, believing they'd successfully lured us into their trap. Now, give me the prophecy, or we start using wands, Malfoy demanded. Go ahead. I raised my Phoenix wand. If you destroy the prophecy, Voldemort won't be very happy, will he? Several Death Eaters hissed at my use of Voldemort's name. Bellatrix shrieked, you dare speak his name with your unworthy lips. Didn't you know? I've been using his name for years. I kept talking, giving my friends time to position themselves according to our plan. He can hear me say it right now. Voldemort. Voldemort. Shut your mouth. Bellatrix screamed. You dare speak his name with your unworthy lips, you dare besmirch it with your half-blood's tongue, did you know he's a half-blood too? I interrupted, remembering information Wednesday had shared. His father was a muggle. Or did he tell you lot he was pure blood? Malfoy moved to silence Bellatrix, clearly concerned about losing control of the situation. Potter, you cannot win against us. Hand over the prophecy now. I pretended to consider this, buying more seconds. From the corner of my eye, I saw Wednesday's hand move in a subtle gesture, our signal. I don't think I will, I said clearly. Stupefy. 6 different voices shouted the stunning spell simultaneously. Red light flashed from our wands, catching several Death Eaters off guard. In the ensuing chaos, we split up exactly as planned, Hermione, Neville and I running one direction, Ron, Ginny and Luna another, with Wednesday seemingly vanishing into shadows. After them. Malfoy shouted. The prophecy is all that matters. We ran through the towering shelves, deliberately leading our pursuers deeper into the Hall of Prophecies. Spells flew past us, shattering glass orbs and releasing ghostly figures that recited prophecies in ethereal voices before dissipating. The cascade effect worked in our favor, creating confusion among the Death Eaters. This way. I called to Hermione and Neville, veering left toward a door we'd memorized from Wednesday's blueprints, not fleeing randomly, but following our carefully plotted route through the department. We burst through into what appeared to be the time room, filled with clocks, time-turners, and strange crystalline containers housing objects that aged and de-aged rapidly. Behind us, several Death Eaters followed, shouting curses that we narrowly dodged. Colloportus. Hermione gasped, sealing the door behind us. It wouldn't hold them long, but we only needed seconds. Where's Wednesday? Neville panted, wand ready but hands shaking slightly. Implementing the next phase, I replied, leading them toward another door. Ron and the others should be heading to the brain room by now. Our shadow anchors pulsed in unison, confirming our allies remained unharmed. Following Wednesday's instructions, we moved methodically through the department, not just fleeing, but deliberately drawing Death Eaters into specific chambers, separating them from one another, reducing their numerical advantage. We passed through a room filled with planets floating in midair, then a chamber containing what appeared to be remnants of ancient magical experiments, always staying just ahead of our pursuers while maintaining our predetermined route. The Death Chamber next, I whispered as we approached another door. That's where everything converges. Harry, are you sure? Hermione looked worried. Wednesday said the veil is dangerous. It's also our best advantage. I touched my shadow anchor, feeling its response to my intention. The others will meet us there. Wednesday will be waiting. We entered the Death Chamber, a large, amphitheater-like room with stone benches descending like steps toward a central dais. Upon the dais stood an ancient stone archway, hung with a tattered black veil that moved slightly despite the still air. The sight of it struck me with unexpected force. The veil seemed to whisper, calling with voices just beyond comprehension. My night orchid pulsed against my chest, resonating with whatever power the archway contained. Harry, stay back from it, Hermione warned, grabbing my arm. Remember what Wednesday said. Before I could respond, another door burst open and Ron, Ginny, and Luna stumbled in, pursued by more Death Eaters. Spells flew across the chamber, forcing us to take cover behind the stone benches. Crucio. Bellatrix's voice rang out, the curse narrowly missing Neville, who dove behind a bench. Protego. I countered, shielding Hermione from another Death Eater's attack. The fight escalated quickly, curses and counter-curses lighting the dimly lit chamber. We were outnumbered, but not outmatched. The shadow training had prepared us well, our movements more coordinated than the Death Eaters anticipated. Still, I scanned the shadows anxiously, wondering where Wednesday had disappeared to. This was the convergence point, she should be here, implementing the final phase of our plan. Then, as if summoned by my thought, darkness pooled unnaturally in the center of the chamber, directly beside the veiled archway. From it emerged Wednesday Addams, but not alone. Sirius Black materialized beside her, followed by Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and several other Order members. They'd used the shadow network Wednesday had established, bypassing conventional magical barriers to arrive precisely when needed. No! Bellatrix shrieked, her face contorting with rage at the sight of unexpected reinforcements. Impossible! Chaos erupted anew as Order members engaged Death Eaters across the chamber. Spells ricocheted off stone surfaces, creating a deadly light show that illuminated the ancient archway in flashes of color. I fought my way toward Wednesday and Sirius, still clutching the prophecy orb. You brought the Order through shadows. Your godfather proved surprisingly adept at shadow walking, Wednesday replied, deflecting a curse with a casual flick of her wand. Family trait, perhaps. Runs in the black blood, Sirius confirmed with a fierce grin, sending a stunning spell at Lucius Malfoy. Your friend here is quite the instructor, Harry. The battle shifted in our favor, Order members driving Death Eaters back from the central dais. I noticed Sirius keeping a careful distance from the veiled archway, clearly warned about its dangers. Then Bellatrix broke from the main fight, her manic focus locked on me and the prophecy I still carried. Give it here, Potter. Give it to me. Crucio, she screamed, the curse flying toward me with deadly intent. Before I could react, Wednesday stepped between us, her expression unchanged even as the unforgivable struck her squarely in the chest. But instead of falling in agony, she merely tilted her head curiously. Interesting, she commented in her usual monotone. Is that supposed to hurt? Bellatrix's eyes widened in shock. What are you? An Adams. Wednesday raised her own wand, not to cast a conventional spell, but to draw a complex pattern in the air that left trails of darkness. We have a different relationship with pain. The darkness coalesced into tendrils that shot toward Bellatrix with serpentine speed, wrapping around her wand arm. She screamed, not in pain, but in genuine terror as her shadow rose from the ground of its own accord, mimicking the binding action against her physical body. Shadow binding, Wednesday explained calmly, advancing toward the now struggling Death Eater. An old family technique. Quite effective against those who enjoy inflicting pain. Bellatrix fought against the shadow restraints with increasing panic, her usual sadistic confidence crumbling. Release me. What magic is this? The kind your master has forgotten exists. Wednesday's dark eyes reflected no emotion, yet carried undeniable power. The boundaries between worlds must be respected, Bellatrix Lestrange. Even by those who serve broken souls. With Bellatrix temporarily contained, I turned my attention back to the main battle, where things had taken another dramatic turn. A new figure had appeared in the chamber doorway, tall and pale, with gleaming red eyes that fixed immediately on me. Voldemort had arrived. Master! Bellatrix shrieked, renewing her struggles against Wednesday's shadow bindings. Help me! His cold gaze swept over the scene, assessing the situation with calculating precision. Order members froze momentarily at his appearance, all except Dumbledore, who stepped through another doorway as if perfectly timed. It was foolish to come here tonight, Tom, Dumbledore said calmly. The Aurors are on their way. By which time I shall be gone, and you dead, Voldemort spat, raising his wand. What followed was the most extraordinary display of magic I'd ever witnessed, Dumbledore and Voldemort dueling with power that defied comprehension, spells colliding in explosions of light and sound that shook the very foundations of the chamber. Amidst this chaos, Wednesday maintained her focus on Bellatrix, the shadow bindings tightening as the Death Eater's struggles grew more desperate. I moved to Wednesday's side, still clutching the prophecy. The veil, she said without looking at me. It's responding to his presence. Look. I turned toward the ancient archway. The tattered black curtain now rippled violently, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. Something about the fabric seemed to reach toward Voldemort, drawn to the fractured nature of his soul. What's happening? I asked, raising my voice to be heard above the battle. The boundary weakens. Wednesday's voice remained steady, but I detected genuine concern. His presence here, so close to the veil, it's creating instability. As if confirming her words, the stone floor beneath the archway began to crack, thin lines spreading outward like a spiderweb. The veil's movement grew more frenzied, its tattered edges seeming to reach beyond the confines of the arch. We need to get him away from here, I said urgently. Yes. And quickly. Wednesday tightened her hold on Bellatrix, who had stopped struggling and now watched the veil with growing horror. The prophecy, he must follow it. Away from the death chamber. Understanding her intent, I held the prophecy orb higher, ensuring Voldemort could see it despite his ongoing duel with Dumbledore. He wants this more than anything, I confirmed. He'll follow it. Wednesday nodded once, then did something unexpected. She released Bellatrix from the shadow bindings. Go to your master, she told the bewildered Death Eater. Tell him Potter is escaping with the prophecy. Bellatrix didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled away from Wednesday, rushing toward Voldemort and screaming above the chaos of battle, the prophecy. Potter's escaping with the prophecy. The distraction worked. Voldemort's attention snapped toward me, his red eyes narrowing as he registered the glowing orb in my hand. With a snarl of rage, he abandoned his duel with Dumbledore and sent a killing curse directly at me. I dove aside, the green light missing by inches. Sirius appeared at my side, pulling me behind a stone bench as more spells flew. Run, Harry, he urged. Get out of this chamber, now. That's the plan, I assured him, glancing toward Wednesday, who nodded confirmation. We need to draw him away from the veil. Understanding dawned on Sirius's face. The instability, Morticia warned us about this. Go. We'll cover you. With a final look at the increasingly unstable archway, I bolted for the exit, deliberately keeping the prophecy visible. As expected, Voldemort pursued, sending Death Eaters ahead to cut off escape routes while he followed more deliberately. Potter, he hissed, his voice carrying an unnatural distance. There is no escape. I didn't respond, focused on leading him exactly where we wanted, away from the vulnerable veil, toward the Ministry atrium where we'd established our final shadow marker. Behind me, I sensed rather than saw Wednesday moving parallel to my path, utilizing shadow walking to remain just out of sight while staying close enough to intervene if needed. Our shadow anchors pulsed in synchrony, confirming all members of our group remained alive, if separated during the battle. The chase continued through the department's maze-like structure, past the time room where hourglasses shattered under stray spells, through the brain room where pale organs floated in green liquid, back toward the spinning entrance chamber. I burst into the circular room, immediately activating my shadow anchor to identify the exit. A trail of darkness appeared, leading to the correct door, which I crashed through into the corridor beyond. The lift stood waiting. I jabbed the button repeatedly, hearing pursuit close behind. As the grills slid open, Wednesday materialized beside me, stepping calmly from shadows as if emerging from a doorway. The others? I gasped, diving into the lift with her. Safe. Dumbledore is containing the veil instability. The lift began to ascend, but Wednesday pressed a hand against the wall, murmuring words I didn't recognize. The lift accelerated unnaturally, racing toward the atrium faster than its normal operation allowed. Voldemort follows close behind. The shadow marker in the atrium is activated. Morticia stands ready. Your mother. She's here. Wednesday nodded once. The final phase requires an Adams matriarch. Family magic at its strongest. The lift arrived with a cheerful ding that seemed bizarrely inappropriate given our circumstances. We stepped into the deserted atrium, moving directly toward the fountain of magical brethren at its center. What now? I asked, still clutching the prophecy. Now we complete what your parents began. Wednesday positioned herself beside the fountain, drawing complex patterns in the air that left trails of silvery darkness. When Voldemort arrives, shatter the prophecy. Shatter it? But, trust me, Harry. The orb itself has been replaced, a shadow duplicate. The real prophecy is safe, but he doesn't know that. Before I could question further, the nearest lift announced another arrival. The grills slid open to reveal Voldemort, his pale face contorted with cold fury, wand raised. Give me the prophecy, Potter, he demanded, advancing slowly. Give it to me, and I may consider sparing your life. I backed toward the fountain, buying seconds for whatever Wednesday was preparing. You know, for someone who claims to be the greatest wizard alive, you're surprisingly bad at killing me. His nostrils flared with anger. Your continued existence is nothing but an accident of ancient magic, magic that will not save you tonight. You're half right, I replied, feeling the night orchid pulse against my chest as I sensed Wednesday's preparations nearing completion. Ancient magic is involved. Just not the kind you understand. With that, I raised the prophecy and smashed it against the floor. The glass sphere shattered with a sound like breaking ice, releasing not the spectral figure we'd expected, but a swirling vortex of darkness that expanded rapidly across the atrium floor. Voldemort's scream of rage transformed into something else as the darkness spread beneath his feet, confusion, then something I'd never heard from him before, fear. What is this magic? He demanded, attempting to step away from the spreading shadow only to find it following his movements like a living thing. Shadow binding, Wednesday replied calmly. On a larger scale than Bellatrix experienced. The Addams family has contained soul fracturers before, Tom Riddle. From within the darkness, a figure rose, not emerging from elsewhere, but forming from the shadow itself. Tall, elegant, with flowing black hair and a dress that seemed to blend with the shadows around her. Morticia Addams stepped forward, her red lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. "Mr. Riddle," she greeted him as if welcoming an expected dinner guest. "How fascinating to finally meet the wizard who's caused such disruption in the shadow realms." Voldemort attempted to apparate, only to find himself frozen in place by the shadow beneath his feet. "What is this?" he hissed, genuine alarm creeping into his voice. "This," Morticia explained, "is the consequence of violating death's natural boundaries. Horcruxes may cheat conventional death, but they cannot hide from shadow justice." She moved her hands in a gesture similar to Wednesday's earlier shadow binding, but vastly more complex and powerful. The darkness responded, rising around Voldemort in tendrils that seemed to search his form with deliberate intent. "Your soul fragments call to each other, Mr. Riddle," Morticia continued. "Even those hidden in objects far from here. The shadows find them most distressing." For the first time, I saw something like panic in Voldemort's red eyes. "This is impossible." "No," Wednesday replied, joining her mother in the complex gesturing. "Merely forgotten. The magic your kind abandoned when the Ministry decided to categorize spells as light or dark. The Addams family preserves what others discard." The shadow tendrils tightened around Voldemort, seemingly penetrating his very being. He writhed in their grasp, his wand falling uselessly to the floor as the darkness invaded him. "We cannot destroy your Horcruxes from here," Morticia informed him calmly. "But we can ensure you understand the price of creating them." With a final, complex gesture from both Addams women, the shadow tendrils pulsed with intense energy. Voldemort's scream echoed throughout the atrium, not of physical pain, but something deeper, more fundamental. For a brief moment, his eyes cleared of their red glow, returning to a more human appearance. Then, abruptly, the shadows released him. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, his form somehow diminished though physically unchanged. "What have you done to me?" he demanded, voice ragged. "Reminded your soul fragments of their origin," Wednesday explained dispassionately. "They now recognize their separation as unnatural. It will make them restless. Seeking reunion," Morticia added. "A temporary measure, until more permanent solutions can be implemented." Voldemort reached for his fallen wand, but before he could grasp it, the fireplaces around the atrium flared green. Ministry officials began appearing, led by the Minister of Magic himself, Cornelius Fudge. "He's here." Fudge gasped, pointing a trembling finger at Voldemort. "He who must not be named. Here. In the Ministry." Taking advantage of the sudden chaos, Voldemort summoned his wand and disapparated, the shadow binding having weakened enough to permit escape, though not before dozens of witnesses confirmed his return. Morticia and Wednesday exchanged a glance of satisfaction as the remaining shadows receded, returning to their natural state. The night orchid against my chest cooled, its urgent pulsing subsiding to a gentle rhythm. "Perfect timing," Morticia observed. "The Ministry witnesses his return, confirming your claims, Harry Potter. And he retreats, weakened by the shadow binding. Will it last?" I asked, watching Ministry officials scurry about in panic. "What you did to his soul fragments." "Long enough," Wednesday replied. "The Horcruxes must still be found and destroyed conventionally, but they've been agitated. They'll be more detectable now, more vulnerable." Fudge approached us hesitantly, his bowler hat clutched in trembling hands. "Potter. What is happening? And who?" he broke off, staring at Morticia with obvious confusion. Before I could respond, Dumbledore appeared from a fireplace, quickly taking control of the situation. "Cornelius, I am ready to tell you everything that has happened here tonight. But first, I need to send Harry back to Hogwarts." In the ensuing confusion, Order members began arriving through various entrances, including Sirius, who looked battered but triumphant. "Harry!" he called, rushing to my side. "You're all right." "And the veil," Dumbledore contained the instability. The boundary is secure again. Thanks to timely intervention, Morticia noted with graceful acknowledgement. Your Professor Dumbledore understands more about shadow magic than most ministry wizards. Did everyone make it? I asked urgently. Ron, Hermione, the others. All safe, Sirius confirmed. Some injuries, but nothing serious. Thanks largely to your friend here. He nodded respectfully toward Wednesday. That shadow binding technique saved lives tonight. Family specialty, Wednesday replied with characteristic understatement. As ministry officials swarmed around Dumbledore and Fudge, demanding explanations, Morticia drew Wednesday and me slightly aside. The blood oath has been honored, she said, her elegant hand resting briefly on Wednesday's shoulder. The Potter-Adams alliance proves its worth once again. But it's not over, I noted, thinking of the Horcruxes still hidden, the war surely coming. Voldemort's weakened, not defeated. Of course not, dear boy. Morticia's red lips curved in a smile that reminded me intensely of Wednesday's rare expressions. The most fascinating stories never end cleanly. They evolve. Mother, Wednesday said with quiet certainty, I need to remain at Hogwarts. Morticia studied her daughter's face, something passing between them that needed no words. I suspected as much. The shadow bond has grown stronger than anticipated. She turned her penetrating gaze to me. Harry Potter, my daughter has fulfilled her formal obligation under the blood oath. Her continued presence at Hogwarts would be a choice, not a requirement. I looked at Wednesday, suddenly understanding what wasn't being said directly. Her mission had been to protect me specifically against Voldemort's mental intrusions and the Department of Mysteries trap. Those immediate threats were neutralized. Any further involvement would be her choice, and mine. I think, I said carefully, that Hogwarts still needs Wednesday Addams. And not just for protection. Wednesday's dark eyes met mine, a silent communication passing between us that felt as natural as breathing. The shadow training remains incomplete, she noted. And Voldemort will return, stronger next time. Then it's settled, Morticia declared. Gomez will be delighted. He's always believed education should be. She paused, selecting the perfect word, traumatic. Before our conversation could continue, Dumbledore approached, having temporarily satisfied Fudge's most urgent questions. Harry, it's time to return to Hogwarts, he said gravely. There is much to discuss, but it must wait until you're safely back at school. He nodded respectfully to Morticia. Mrs. Addams, your assistance tonight was invaluable. The shadow binding you performed, I have not seen its like in many decades. The pleasure was entirely mine, Professor Dumbledore. Morticia extended her hand, which Dumbledore kissed with old-world courtesy. I trust you'll ensure my daughter's education continues to be, appropriately challenging. I believe Miss Addams creates sufficient challenges for herself, Dumbledore replied with twinkling eyes. But I shall certainly endeavor to support her unique talents. As arrangements were made for our return to Hogwarts, I found a moment alone with Wednesday. Thank you, I said simply. For everything. The shadow magic, the protection, bringing Sirius and the order, all of it. The blood oath demanded nothing less. She studied me with those fathomless dark eyes. But what comes next is choice, not obligation. And you're choosing to stay. Yes. For the first time, I saw something like uncertainty in her expression. The Addams blessing in your blood has awakened fully now. You could continue developing shadow magic without my guidance. I don't want to, I said honestly. Whatever this is, I gestured between us, indicating the connection we both felt but hadn't fully defined, it's not finished. It's just beginning. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. The Potter-Adams alliance evolves. As Mother said. Into what, exactly? That, Wednesday replied with rare lightness, is what we'll discover next. 3 days later, Hogwarts felt both utterly changed and strangely normal. The Daily Prophet had finally acknowledged Voldemort's return, running front-page headlines about the Ministry confrontation. Dumbledore had been fully reinstated as headmaster. Umbridge had been found wandering the Forbidden Forest, muttering about centaurs and still bearing faint traces of Wednesday's blood quill enchantment across her hands. Our shadow circle gathered in the room of requirement, now expanded to include a few additional DA members who'd shown particular aptitude for Wednesday's techniques. The mood was celebratory but focused, everyone understanding that our victory at the Ministry represented only the opening stage of a longer conflict. The shadow anchors worked perfectly, Hermione reported, having analyzed their performance during the battle. Ron and I were separated during the fighting, but I could sense his location through the connection. They respond to intent and necessity, Wednesday confirmed. The more urgent the need, the stronger the connection. What happens now? Neville asked, his newfound confidence evident in his direct question. With you-know-who, with the Horcruxes, with all of it? I exchanged glances with Wednesday before answering. The shadow binding Morticia performed weakened him temporarily and made the Horcruxes more detectable. Dumbledore has ideas about where to start looking. But it's going to be a process, not a single battle. And we'll be ready, Ron added firmly. More than ready, Wednesday agreed. The shadow training continues. What you've learned so far is foundational. There are deeper techniques, older magics that will prove useful in the coming conflict. Luna, who'd been unusually quiet, looked up from the shadow anchor she'd been studying. Your auras have merged, she observed dreamily, looking between Wednesday and me. The Potter gold and Adam's black. It's quite beautiful. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but Wednesday merely nodded, unsurprised by Luna's perception. The blood oath evolves with each generation, she explained to the group. What began as alliance becomes partnership, then something more integrated. Like magical symbiosis? Hermione suggested, academic interest overcoming her lingering reservations about shadow magic. In a sense. Wednesday's dark eyes met mine briefly. The Potter light and Adam's shadow create balance neither could achieve alone. Particularly useful against an enemy who has fractured himself into lightless fragments. The conversation turned to practical matters, continued training schedules, summer communication plans, strategies for the coming school year. Throughout it all, I felt a sense of rightness that had been missing before Wednesday's arrival at Hogwarts. Not just because of the protection she'd provided, but because of what she'd awakened within me, capacities and connections I might never have discovered otherwise. Later, as the meeting concluded and others drifted away in pairs, Wednesday and I remained behind. The room shifted around us, sensing our needs and transforming into a space that resembled the Star Chamber but with comfortable seating. Your godfather has been officially cleared, Wednesday noted, picking up our earlier conversation. The Ministry issued a full pardon now that they've acknowledged Pettigrew's survival. Yes, I confirmed, still amazed by this unexpected turn in Sirius's fortunes. He's renovating Grimmauld Place. Says I can live with him now, properly. Good. Family matters. She sat beside me, closer than her usual careful distance. My mother was impressed with him. Says the black affinity for shadow work remains strong, despite generations of suppression. Shadow magic runs in his family too. Most old wizarding families had some connection to it, before the Ministry's classification system discouraged alternative magical traditions. Wednesday removed something from her pocket, a small leather pouch. Which brings me to this. She handed me the pouch, which contained what appeared to be a silver signet ring bearing a stylized P overlaid with subtle shadow patterns. The Potter shadow sigil, she explained. Your father left it with my mother for safekeeping. It's meant to be yours when you came of age, but given recent events, she felt it should be returned now. I examined the ring with wonder, recognizing it as tangible evidence of my family's connection to shadow magic, a tradition I'd known nothing about until Wednesday's arrival. There's more to learn, Wednesday continued. About your family history, about the Potter-Adams alliance, about shadow magic itself. This summer, if you're willing, you could visit the Addams family manor. See the archives, meet my family properly. The invitation carried weight beyond its simple words, an opening to a deeper understanding of my heritage, yes, but also a step toward defining whatever was developing between us. I'd like that, I said honestly, slipping the ring onto my finger. It adjusted immediately to fit perfectly, a pleasant coolness settling against my skin. Though I'm not sure your family is ready for me. Oh, they're quite prepared. Pugsley has already booby-trapped your potential guest room. A genuine smile flickered across her face. He's very dedicated to making visitors feel welcome. I laughed, imagining what an Addams welcome might entail. Should I be worried? Moderately. But your shadow reflexes have improved considerably. Wednesday's expression grew more serious. Harry, what happened at the ministry, the shadow binding, the prophecy deception, all of it, was just the beginning. Voldemort will recover, adapt, return stronger. I know. I touched the night orchid that remained a constant presence against my chest. But we'll be stronger too. Yes. She looked at me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond surface thoughts. The Potter-Addams connection wasn't just about protection. It was about preparation. For both of us. Preparation for what? Balance, she said simply. Light needs shadow. Shadow needs light. Together, they create something neither can achieve alone. As if demonstrating, she raised her hand, summoning darkness that pooled in her palm. I mirrored the gesture instinctively, but instead of darkness, a gentle golden light gathered in my hand. When we brought our palms close together, the energies didn't fight or cancel each other, they intertwined, creating a swirling pattern of gold and black that illuminated the space between us. That's us, I realized aloud. Potter and Addams. Light and shadow. Wednesday nodded, watching the energies dance together. A balance Voldemort cannot comprehend, let alone counter. His fractured soul knows only division, not integration. The intertwined energies faded gradually as we lowered our hands, but the connection remained, a tangible current between us that had evolved from protection duty into genuine partnership. So, I said, what happens next? Wednesday's dark eyes held a rare glint of something like anticipation. We continue training. Prepare for what's coming. And. She hesitated briefly, explore what this evolving connection means. For both of us. I'd like that, I said again, more softly this time. As we left the room of requirement together, walking side by side through corridors that had witnessed centuries of magical alliances and conflicts, I felt a sense of clarity that had eluded me since Voldemort's return. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Horcruxes, Death Eaters, magical warfare, I would face them not just as Harry Potter, the boy who lived, but as part of something larger and more ancient, the Potter-Addams alliance, light and shadow in balance, neither complete without the other. And beside me walked Wednesday Addams, sent to protect me, choosing to stay, creating something new from ancient connections. Not every dark thing should be feared, I'd learned. Some darkness protects what light alone cannot defend. Every bully who had crossed Wednesday's path at Hogwarts had learned that lesson the hard way. Soon, Voldemort himself would understand the full consequences of challenging not just the boy who lived, but the shadow legacy that now stood with him, ancient, powerful, and perfectly balanced between worlds. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.